Thought I'd have a big tuning fork going as we start. What's up? Welcome to Wednesday night. It is another excellent vibrant. So excited to be joined by great friends this evening. And it happens to be my 34th birthday. Kind of a cool one. It's like a palindrome birthday. 322, 2023. I'm 34, which is kind of like 322 if you add the twos together. Pretty exciting. And, since I had this big fork out, thanks to all the people in the community that 1 year ago banded together and donated a really nice amount to help me acquire this cool thing. It's seen a lot of sessions with people, and it's been a really excellent tool. So thank you. Tonight, though, we've been looking forward to this podcast for many weeks. We are joined by my good friend Eileen McKusick, the author of Tuning the Human Biofield, Electric Body, Electric Health. Also runs the Biofield tuning store online where you can get a sonic slider, one of these. I highly recommend you have one of these in your toolkit, maybe even two. And I could actually give a lot more to Eileen's credentials, but you all know her, you all love her. We're also joined by returning guest, Austin Walters, the biomagnetism guy. And Eileen and Austin haven't had a chance to talk yet, but I just get so much out of both of your perspectives, and I see a really cool overlap there. And tonight, I'm just hoping to see what kind of sparks fly as we talk about the electrome, our electricity, our electric health, and our magnetic health, how they're the same or how they're different or how they tie in together. We'll see. And of course, I got my main man, Gabriel, here with me. That's a cool shirt you got, bro. So, welcome, Eileen. How are you doing?
Hey, Chance. I'm good. I'm glad to be here with you guys talking about cool things.
Yes, we're going to have such a good time. Austin, bro, how have you been?
I've been doing well. Actually, this week we are currently in a biomagnetism training. So I'm here in Jersey in this hotel room. And long days training, all kinds of people teaching about our therapy. So I'm primed and ready to rock. I've been talking magnets all day. So be here until Saturday and then fly back home.
Very cool, man. That sounds good. Why don't we talk about what the training you're doing? I know Ishan in the chat here, he's been apparently catching a ride to Panera with you.
that has been the case. I've been pulling double duty of teaching and also shuttle duty.
So I know the audience probably has a pretty good grasp on Biofield anatomy, Biofield tuning, as well as someone who hasn't gone through the process of doing a little bit of extra personal study. And so I would like to maybe open with talking about biomagnetism and invite Eileen to jump in, ask questions, comment. I'd like to see where the overlap between these modalities lies. But first, we might want to introduce biomagnetism again. It's something we've only talked about really thoroughly once on the podcast before, and enlighten us, bro.
It's a deep dive. So the shortened version of this is going to be that in around 1988, a Mexican physician by the name of Dr. Isaac Goiz Duran was attending an energy medicine conference. The head physician at NASA, his name is Dr. Richard Broeringermeyer, was giving a talk on the effects magnetic fields were having on the supposed astronauts when they would go to the space station, and the prolonged physiological effects that would occur when they
like how you threw in supposed. I'm with you.
I'm still up in the air on that. We'll see. But what they were noticing is that these high altitude experiments or prolonged periods of time when they were outside of the Earth's concentrated subtle magnetic field is that a physiological effect would start to occur. Dr. Broeringermeyer wasn't exactly sure of what was causing this effect. So later on, they were starting to theorize that what they were seeing was that after the astronauts, of course, would have these physicals done prior to shuttle launch and all these experiments. And these are very rigorous tests, and NASA spends exorbitant amounts of money in order to make sure that all their T's are crossed and so forth. What they were seeing when they would come back, though, is that one leg would be shorter than the other. And they weren't entirely sure what was causing that. So this head physician at NASA's theory was that essentially it was a physiological stress that was happening to these astronauts. So they started playing around with introducing concentrated magnetic fields into the shoes to see if that would have an effect on this, 1/4 inch difference of leg length. What they noticed after about 6 weeks of wearing either north or south, they were just using one pole in both shoes, is that the legs would recorrect after about 6 weeks. So Dr. Boehringer-Ingelmeyer says, aha, I think that I'm onto something. Well, we fast forward to this, conference that he's teaching at, and Dr. Goiz is sitting there listening to this, and he's trying to put 2 and 2 together. He's very fascinated by this, but in Spanish and Mexican culture, duality is heavily a part of the culture. So he's listening to this physician give the talk, and he goes, well, I wonder why he's only using one pole. Shouldn't he be incorporating north and south together in some way in order to get an optimal effect? So after this talk, he goes back to Mexico, and he says, I'm going to mess with the first patient that I see come Monday morning is going to get this, the guinea pig experience. And so the first patient that he sees is actually an HIV patient. He explains to the guy, hey, I went to this conference. There's nothing, that I really know what I'm doing, but if you don't mind, I would like to mess with this magnet. I have a theory. And so this is the beginnings of biomagnetism. Of course, we could trace the roots of using magnets all the way back to, Chinese medicine, Hippocrates, the Egyptians. Everybody has been trying to use lodestones, magnets, what have you, since we, have recorded history. And so Dr. Goiz basically had an assistant take a magnet, and at this point in time, it was an old speaker magnet, and he had the head. Did you lose me?
Oh, you got a little wobbly,
Okay.
but you're back. Hotel internet, I got it.
Yeah, that's part of it. But he would have the assistant drag the magnet starting at the top of the head. And what he was trying to prove out is that if indeed there is a physiological imbalance in the tissue or the pH, that he should be able to observe this same leg length discrepancy happen when you introduce a magnetic field to an area of disease. So long story short here is that they found the first point. So let's say that, for instance, and of course, I just happen to have a magnet here with me. So these would be the magnets that we use today. But let's say that the black magnet was over an area of imbalance. We could say maybe the thyroid. The theory behind this is that if there is imbalance occurring in that gland and there's a pH shift, then you can actually observe in the legs about a 1/4 inch of a leg length discrepancy differential. And what this tells us is that the body is actually crying out for help in a very subtle way. And if you're paying attention to what the body's trying to tell you, then you can find the corresponding opposite pair. And for people who are trying to wrap their head around this, you can kind of think of it like acupuncture, where we would have maybe a point A and a point B, except that biomagnetism has nothing to do with the acupuncture system per se. So what we're really paying attention to is that, let's say that strep throat is causing an imbalance, wherever it's hiding in the body, and there are a few places that it can hide. The manifestation may occur in the throat, but the actual bacteria could be hiding out somewhere in the body. What we're trying to do is take North Pole and South Pole, and we're finding that spot, that connection, and we're allowing the body to restabilize the pH so that that pathogen can no longer proliferate or exist. And then the immune system kicks in, comes into play, gets rid of the pathogen, and then you experience homeostasis. That's kind of a long way around our therapy. So really at the base of our therapy is the idea that the body already knows how to heal itself, and that the reason the magnetic fields even work in the first place is because we are about 10% hydrogen in the body, and the magnetic field actually has an effect on the hydrogen itself. So
I think we might be more hydrogen than that even.
You're right. I mean, that's an estimate.
I just talked to George Wiseman yesterday as well.
Okay. A lot of times when we have physicians that attend the conferences, I have to kind of, balance and juggle what, you know, the mainstream, the Wikipedia or Google model showing, you know, or whatever.
We're in the black belt class.
Right.
Here.
Yeah.
I'll hold back.
So really the aim of the therapy is to help your body heal itself. And it already knows how to do that. We just need to introduce the correct environment in order for it to do so. And then it will try to return to homeostasis. Now, of course, there are a lot of other factors involved when we talk about complex disease processes. But, you know, if you have a UTI or strep throat or pink eye or, you know, whatever, you're looking at, depending on where you are in the US, somewhere around a 15 to 20 minute placement time. And it could be multiple pairs that you're, you know, having placed on you. And then because it takes that amount of time, we can observe this through the leg length discrepancy change, right? So I can place a black magnet on an area of imbalance and I can observe the leg will actually, and this is terrible because I'm on, you know, the camera, and this is really, you know, a hands-on, you need to see it in person. But let's say that the leg shifts because of that imbalance. It's a contractual response by the muscle due to that hydrogen moving around in the body. If we place that second magnet and the leg evens out, it's a relaxation. If we wait, say 10 minutes and we remove one of those magnets, you'll see that that discrepancy is a little bit less than it was. So it tells you that the body is balancing itself out. So we essentially wait. That 15-minute time frame seems to be right where the legs will remain even when you remove one magnet. And that's the signal that pH of that area has been restored. And again, we have pH levels are different in different areas of the body. So we're not trying to suppose that that area is supposed to be, you know, there are a lot of alternative wellness claims that that area needs to always be in a pH balance. Well, that's really a misnomer because the stomach is very acidic, you know. So all we're worried about is that the body knows how to heal itself, and we just need to introduce a tool or an environment, just like you would throw chlorine into a pool, so that the body can go do its job. And that was kind of a really long.
No, it's really cool, man. It sounds like you're helping the body signal it, you know, using this sort of detection method of the magnets in a way, showing the body the cue to where it needs attention. Lately, I've been likening the tuning process to like people not realizing they're wearing a kick me sign on their back. And that kick me sign is like their expectations about life or something about themselves they believe that came from a long time ago, potentially, that they no longer realize is there. And the forks are helping us find where that post-it note is and then giving them the option to take it off, right? But Eileen, when it comes to the magnetism of our body and our aura, our energy field, what type of ways has that idea of magnetism played into your thinking as, you know, a citizen scientist when it comes to understanding human energy, subtle energy? The leg length thing is particularly interesting because I have had experiences with leg length discrepancy getting rectified by the tuning process. So to me, that makes like a really great diagnostic metric. Probably a lot of people don't even realize if theirs is off, but yeah, we threw a lot out there. Eileen, you want to jump in on it?
There's so many things that I could say right now.
Get in there.
Yeah. Come on.
All right. Well, first, Chance, before I get to your question, I just want to speak to a few things that you said. Are you familiar with the work of Jerry Tennant and his book Healing is Voltage, right? So
extremely.
Okay, so he talks about pH as voltage. So here you are speaking in the magnetic model on one hand regarding magnets, but speaking in the chemical model in the other regarding pH, right? So just from an electric perspective, like you're shifting the voltage in that area and the flow of voltage, you know, especially in relationship to those two parts, right? So absolutely. Yeah, so I just had, every time you said pH, I had to mentally translate it to voltage because I really want to encourage people to think electrically and kind of get out of this chemical model where people are talking about their hormones and their serotonin and their dopamine. And, you know, I just don't think it's useful language, really, because everything is vibes. Everything is like, how you feel, man? You know, it's like, are you happy? You have happy vibes. It doesn't matter if it's serotonin or dopamine or whatever. And so much of what they tell us about chemistry and these things, like, is it really true? You know what I mean? Like, how can we really know? But we know what it's like, right? If our energy is low, if our voltage is low, if our I just think we need to simplify it and keep it electrical, right? So that was just one thought that I had. Another thought was that it's so much the same as biofield tuning, right? It's really the same idea that the body has an electrical system. You know, the Chinese have been right all along with acupuncture, and I've been reading this book, and so far, have you guys seen this book? Do you know about it?
I have not.
Seen
I haven't
it
read
on the Amazon recommendations,
Yeah.
but I haven't checked it out yet.
Well, you know,
She's
my
the one
friend,
that's coined sort of the idea of the electrome.
the electrome, yeah.
I love it.
My friend Shamini Jan looked at this and she's like, it's just a setup for like big corporations to create electric medical devices.
it. Of course.
And so, you know, so I think that there's like, you know, they're recognizing electricity in the body, but they don't talk about magnetic fields.
Right.
Magnetic fields, right? So you're working with the flow of current in the body. But what I discovered is that, what I discovered, it'd be cool to do it together, actually, to combine the two, right?
Yeah.
But the leg length thing, I notice a lot because I come from a massage background. And so when I have people on a treatment table, you know, I will always kind of assess, do they have a twist? Do they have a shorten? And a lot of people have one leg shorter than the other. I'm curious, would you say you see more shorter left legs or right legs?
That's a really good question, Eileen. And I would say that, I don't know, probably 95% of the time, it's typically the right leg that seems to be shorter, but I have had clients where it is the left leg. It's much more rare. But yeah, I would say it's definitely more the right than the left. And so Dr. Goiz had theorized that was due to the fact that the heart was, you know, offset a little bit, and that every time it pumps, that it depolarizes the left leg. So it's more common to see that physiological stress in the right. I mean, that was just a theory, you know.
You know what my theory is? It's from driving.
That wouldn't surprise me either. Although I will say, working with children, you know, like my 3-year-old, my 3-year-old nephew had it. So Dr. Goiz felt that it might have been due to maybe the birth trauma or, you know, some other unforeseen thing that, you know, all we were worried about is like, well, we observe it. And, you know, for us, before we start the therapy, we need to have a flat baseline. So we actually have to correct that leg length before we really dive into the therapy. So yeah, fix that imbalance, allow the body to reach a calming effect, if you will. Which we can actually fix.
The root chakra is that the most common flavor of stuck energy for people's root chakra is what I call the torturous to-do list. Exactly. Like the stuck mental energy of spinning in your mind through all the tasks you think you need to do, or you suck if you don't get it done. And that's like the back right of the right hip, you know, like right glute. So if there's a lot of stuck energy there, it makes sense that it would pull the right hip out of alignment towards that stuck energy, shorten the right leg. I do see a lot of that.
Yeah. And we can also see this effect sometimes in the arms as well. You know, and the physician that is basically my mentor, Dr. Luis Garcia, for years, he had his right arm was shorter than his left. And his father was like, well, that's just genetics. That's how it is. So he would have to get his, you know, suits tailored in a different way. And, you know, once he discovered biomagnetism and he recorrected that, you know, now the arms are permanently even. So it's really a matter of just readjusting that imbalance and allowing the body to return to normal. So yeah, it's very fascinating.
Yeah, and it's beautiful that this can be done with things as simple as magnets and tuning forks, and that we don't need fancy, expensive devices that plug in.
I completely agree. And, you know, and so many of the people that either are clients of mine or anybody that has learned this therapy have usually been through the ringer of the medical establishment and have had very poor experiences, or, you know, spent, you know, life savings, you know, trying to resolve an issue. And so it's really wonderful to be able to offer something that not only is so portable, but it's simple. I can give the client homework and they can do it themselves. Like you have the power to heal yourself. Like I might be a facilitator and I'm there to kind of jumpstart the process, but ultimately you are responsible for that health moving forward. And it doesn't have to be, through this model or system of herding through, $1 billion machines that, that we need to have permission from a doctor to, so I think trying to shift the model and the mindset, and then also show people that there's a tool available, whether it's tuning forks or magnets, that can actually have a positive effect without you having to, take a pill or, try to be on some type of regulatory supplement that's going to fix your blood pressure. To me, that's critical. And that's the whole reason that I do what I do, because I really find empowerment to be at the forefront of all of this, really. So, yeah.
I start
I would love to
by telling people to get a weighted tuning fork, that before paying anyone else to tune you, get one of these. But the advantage of having the practitioner, the external person, is, again, the metaphor of the kick me sign on your back is pretty astute. And then there's, when we're talking about the anatomy of the biofield, there is stuff farther away from your body.
Sure.
Like, there's a guy that I worked with recently that the poor guy had dislocated his right shoulder some 12 or more times over the course of his life. And all went back to early childhood, not enjoying as a baby the energy of explosive, poorly managed anger, and then creating the belief I don't get angry because angry people suck. And then boom, right shoulder problems repeatedly. But he doesn't have to have that continue, because the root belief of angry people suck can be removed, and now his normal levels of assertiveness can come through. So my point in bringing that up, Austin, is have you incorporated any semblance of the biofield anatomy or the emotional or self-limiting belief type of aspects of how you would approach explaining to someone maybe the why behind their injuries? Or are you more just helping them get over them? Because, like, to me, I think the powerful thing is getting to the why of it, the happening, rather than just sort of addressing that it happened,
Correct. So typically the way that we look at this is that, there's two schools of thought, and I find that the middle way is usually the best way. And there's, truth and value in, either end of the extremes. But for example, like, okay, let's say that I have a manifestation of, a disease, right? I have a bacterial infection, conjunctivitis, strep throat, whatever. If I take a swab and I swab the back of my throat, and then I swab the back of your throat with a live bacteria, we're not going to talk about viruses because that's a whole other topic. But chances are that if that bacteria is aggressive enough, and then your emotional state is poor enough, that the bacteria that I just introduced is going to overwhelm your, ability to fight off symptoms. So that's what we would refer to as just direct transference of infection. Now, the reason that it's so important for us to look at emotions is because I would say Dr. Garcia would probably agree with me on this, is that in our line of thinking, it's 50% emotion and then 50% like whatever little bugs are, in your system, which, by the way, the body create on its own. The idea that every single germ out there comes from the outside is nonsense, in my opinion. Again, I think there obviously are bacteria on surfaces, but we're made up of tons of different little microbes. We're an ocean of life, right? And so if we're managing that emotional state, you'll notice that people that can manage that stress or that emotion tend to move through, seasons of what we would refer to like the flu and sickness and whatever, without getting sick. Well, why? Why is that? If there's a supposed bug that's going to get you, most of the time it's because they can manage the emotion. But when you introduce an overburden human being with a chronic emotional state that's not helpful, you find that disease will show up. So for us, it's kind of like an iceberg where we have emotions as like the basic causal factor, and then everything else kind of stems out from that, if that makes sense. So yes, like for example, Eileen, I'm not sure if you're familiar with muscle testing. I'm sure you probably know it, right? So that's how, primarily that's how we scan, is through muscle testing and asking. So we'll ask at the feet, but there's 1,000 ways to do it. And really, we're just asking the body, what do you need from me in order to facilitate your healing, you know? And so a part of a session with us is also including asking about those emotions. And sometimes, you know, if we find what we would call a pathogen, I'm always asking, is there an emotion associated with that pathogen? Do I really need to observe and root it out in order to bring it up to the client so that they can either have an emotional release or figure out a way to manage it in a way that allows them to move forward without being stuck. So I think that's where there's a lot of positive overlap between, you know, your therapy, Eileen, and kind of what we do. Because, you know, sound and magnetism and all that stuff is really, it's playing with the same systems in a way, you know. And so I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's really to me the exact same because a vibrating tuning fork being passed through your magnetic field is having a magnetic effect, right? So we know that magnetic fields guide and inform electric currents. And so I'm manipulating the magnetic field in order to shift the way electricity is running in the body, right? Just supporting the body and getting itself in order, you know, and you're doing the same thing. You're just supporting it and getting itself in order. It wants to get in order. It's just having a time. And then, you know, so we're coming with the same thing with the magnetic force, basically. We're coming in with the same thing to do the same thing. And yeah, emotions play a huge role. You know, how regulated is the system? If the system stays in a state of regulation and coherence, it doesn't need to break down and discharge and rest. You know, it's running really fine, and it doesn't need to go into deep cleaning mode. You know, that's what I see flus as, is like when your oven deep cleans, it gets hot, you know, you can't cook anything in it, and it's just gotta clean out. And you know, as far as like, do bacteria and viruses, are there little boogeymen out there that jump around? I wonder about that. You know, I think the way to reconcile that duality is through the idea of resonance. You know, that certainly we can resonate in each other. If you're, you know, you've been stressed and tired and your body is suddenly resonating with that need to like clean out and shut down, and I'm also kind of tired and beat down, then that resonance is going to kick off my deep cleaning cycle, you know, just like a yawn does. I mean, when I yawn and make you yawn, I don't get any yawn particles on you, you know, but it just kind of kicks in the same response. Same with women and their periods, or even people throwing up, you know, and it's just like, it's a resonant response rather than a microbe. I don't know. I'm just not convinced.
The vibe is what is infectious.
Well,
I want to add to that too, that the work of guys like Matt Powers, who we've talked to before, demonstrating that at least several of the more common forms of bacteria serve as a type of universal chassis that can change into other, like literally shift its own genetic expression based on what is applicable in the environment that it finds itself. So for all we know, it's actually not we're getting infected from some external thing, but that the vibe that we decide to hold in our vessel, the feeling that gets stuck, or like Eileen mentioned, you know, what is in the environment around us, like somebody else detoxing, giving us the signal that maybe we should too, because we're in a similar environment, then the bacteria biome inside of us may just change. Like, I think that perhaps tuning and biomagnetism can pretty much shift your biome without you needing to supplement the probiotics and things of that nature. Don't get me wrong, fermented foods are good. I think that there's probably both approaches have some effect, but I think we have more sovereignty over our inner world even down to that granular microbiome, without necessarily needing anything other than to take full responsibility for our energy.
Sure. I would absolutely agree. I mean, and of course there is that physical aspect, right? We eat food. We need to make sure that we are getting nutrients to build a healthy cell, right? Because if we don't eat, we would die. Or if we don't drink, fluid, then we'll dehydrate and we'll kick the bucket that way. But yes, and that's kind of why I mentioned pleomorphism, because there are those microbes that are visible in the blood that have the ability to either signal or however it occurs, doesn't really matter. The fact is that the body innately already knows what it needs when it needs it. And of course I have seen plenty of people that are in what we would refer to as a chronic disease state. And I do think if you're going to say go to the hospital, say if you get in a car accident, right, and you're bleeding out or whatever, you got laceration, and they have to intervene and remove glass or do whatever it is, you've opened up a cavity that normally is not exposed to the outside world. And I do think in those cases, that's where we have to use temperance and say, okay, well, this person did get an infection, but that's because you're changing the local environment that normally would not exist that way. In the same way that like a urinary tract infection, even like if you were to measure, through urinalysis, even though that, we could argue about how accurate they are. But let's just say, for example, like if we find, the E. coli bacteria, which is normal in our system, right? It's supposed to be in the gut. But if we find it in the urinary tract, it's not supposed to be there. So it could cause inflammation. But again, you would never normally see that unless you're tampering with things in a way that the nature didn't intend, right? So if you get
the E. coli is one of them that Powers was demonstrating shifts into other stuff,
and they do. That's again this model of pleomorphism that given the electrical value changes or there's some type of shift, whether it's emotional, energetic, or whatever, that a bacteria can turn into a blood cell, and then that blood cell can turn into a parasite, and we don't understand the mechanism of how that occurs exactly, but again, it's a mechanism of need. What is needed at the time.
Eggleston brothers talk a lot about that, how the body's like internal generating parasites basically to run particular protocols that the body's actually needing to happen. I think that's the really helpful takeaway, is that everything dissonant or symptomatic is actually our body doing its best with what we are offering and signaling us to help us see, in a way mirroring back to us what it is that we're giving to it. I wanted to ask Eileen, though, about this is maybe slightly a pivot, but I think that it pertains to magnetism quite well. You talked about on the 12th, on your 12th episode of Sonic Sundays on Eileen's YouTube channel, which people should go subscribe to, there are detectable bands that are vertical in the biofield, which is very interesting. You brought up the 12 bands of the biofield and how that might relate to what people talk about in terms of 12-strand DNA activation, kind of new agey feeling stuff, but also like maybe something that we can tap into with our intentionality. Can you tell us a little bit about the bands you've detected in the biofield? Because that sounds very magnetic to me. When you see visual representations of magnetic fields, it's always like that, with this sort of banded, concentric ring type structure.
Yeah, even if you take a bar magnet and you put a piece of paper over it and sprinkle iron filings, they'll form into these bands around the magnet. And so I don't even know really how it came to me. I think it was sort of like in a meditative vision. It's just sort of dawned on me that the field was banded. So your biofield is a bubble. It's a plasma bubble and a torus. So the way that I perceive it is that you have a central channel. You draw in positive charge from the atmosphere and the sun and negative charge from the surface of the earth. And they spiral around going up the spine, like the Ida and the Pingala and the Vedic representation of this, positive and negative charge. And then the charges circulate around the outer boundary of the field and create a double layer plasma membrane that's the boundary of our sort of discrete electrical system. And and so, you think about a torus, you think about a bubble, you might think of it as being smooth. But but I just kind of got insight into the fact that it actually had 12 bands, and that, you know, they're maybe about that wide in their way around. And so we know we have, I think, 12 cranial nerves, the idea that there's 12 meridians. And then, of course, Arthur and his 12 knights and Christ and his 12 disciples, this sort of image of 12 around one.
Zodiac.
The zodiac, right? So this sort of this breaking things into this 12 really shows up everywhere metaphorically. It's fractal in a lot of different kinds of representations. And then I got the insight that each one of those 12 bands was comprised of 12 strands, almost like fiber optic. You remember fiber optic lamps?
Oh yeah. From like the 80s. Yeah.
From the 80s. There's like 12 like fiber optic strands inside each band, which creates 144 strands of light circulating through us continuously. And I know people talk about, you know, I've heard peripherally of like 144 strand DNA or DNA activations, but I, you know, this is a spiraling thing. And I think if people have sort of seen that vision, and I kind of had this vision and the seeing of it, that there's something to it. And that there's, so what I did in that particular broadcast was just kind of make everybody hip to the fact that this was going on. And then did a tuning to just increase the amount of light and energy flowing through that whole system, right? Because the tensile integrity of the boundary of our biofield is really key in all forms of health. Like if you think about cell membranes, any kind of membranes, right? Like a good egg has got like a nice thick shell. Whereas if you ever crack an egg and it's got a thin shell, you're like, I don't know what that thing was about.
That's right.
So this idea of having a strong membrane is really important. So, you know, any kind of this idea that it's banded, we want those bands to be really strong as well. And so just using sound and intention and awareness to increase the voltage in that whole circulatory system.
So I want to jump in and throw a lot of my thoughts all on the table while we're talking about the 12 bands. I've got all kinds of notes, so I'm just going to throw it all out. So one of the things I do is I'm very linguistic, and I see a lot of subtle energies seeded into our consciousness right in plain sight. They go overlooked. And one good example is like, you know, a lot of people were talking about what the CDC says for 2 or 3 years. Well, the phrase CDC says is whispering seed diseases. And so all those times people keep saying, the CDC says, we are crop dusting our consciousness with twilight language. And we're actually creating a fertile mindset for disease to be seeded. Mm-hmm. And so I have quite a few really fun examples of this kind of magic. You know,
this is why I keep this guy around.
Spellcasting, yeah.
You got it. Yep. Yeah. I'm really dialed into these subtle powers of suggestion. You know, we know about the nocebo effect is really a valuable thing to for people to maybe pick up and look into. You know, they say that there was a fella in the schoolyard that all the guys really hated this dude. So, yeah, big love, Carrie. And so they decided, you know, we're going to get this guy. We're going to really give him his comeuppance. They black bagged him at night and took him out in the schoolyard, and they suggested to him, we're going to cut your head off, and I'm going to keep this PG. You know, they were really, really getting this guy worked up, and they put him down on a stump, and then they threw a cold rag on his neck, and he died because they told him, we're going to kill you. And when that rag hit him, homie believed it. And so the nocebo effect also, there's another term, I don't actually have the scientific phrasing for this, but, you know, women can get pregnant and not be pregnant. They can go all the way to term and there's no baby in there. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a Virgin Mary kind of thing going on. And I don't know what that's called, but that's a real thing, that women can be pregnant with no baby in there. So the power of suggestion really gets to me. And so I just thought I would throw this one too. 12 bands. 12 is such a sacred number. and it's seated in our language in really fun and cool ways. Like when we say went to, want to, on to, into, all of those are saying the 1 and the 2. That standard of the 12, that is the metrics of the matrix of the realm. So I just wanted to throw all that out there, that like even in our language, that sacred 12 you're talking about is like subtly acknowledged, but we don't acknowledge that it's it's a standard of the way we speak. So I'll just throw all that out, step back.
Wow, well, that's really cool. Now I'm going to look at that differently. 1, 2. Yeah, on 2.
CDC says that was a good one. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and you know, in our crowd, we're pretty skeptical about CV and everything that went down with all that. So yeah, I'm tracking. I'm getting what you're throwing down. I also noticed just randomly that your shirt and this random painting in the hotel are very similar in the vibe. So
They are.
yes, universal synchronicity at work tonight, right?
That's his vibrant uniform.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where am I merch?
Interversemerch.com, everybody. Get some of my art on shirt. Okay.
Oh, you know, I got one more. I thought of this last week. I dropped it on Chance, and Chance was like, "Oh, that's right. This is a good one." Eileen, I think you'll like this. So a while back, we something we do over on another channel on the spiders. We're really into this study of ophiolatry. Is that right, Chance? Did I say it right? Ophiolatry?
Yep, it's serpent
Yeah.
symbolism in religion.
Yeah,
Or
not
straight
to
up
be
serpent
confused with
worship.
ophiology, which is a word I made up, I think. So ophi means serpent, and it's hiding out in our language in the most fascinating ways. I believe it's Greek. Even like an officer has a lot to do with the snakiness of the dynamics. But it's so you're talking about the biomorphic field has the 2 layers and the 12 bands. Well, in the word biomorphic is in the biofield. That's it. It's in the word biofield. Is bi to ophi, snakes.
Wow.
So it sneaks in places where we don't even realize that there's a deeper truth to this language, and it comports to the unseen realm in just fascinating and fun ways. So yeah, that one hit me last week. I thought I'd slide that your way.
I'm really glad. That was a little bit of a mind blow.
Yeah. Biomorphic field, biofield is like 2 snakes, like a caduceus, right?
Yeah, like a caduceus. Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Positive and negative charges spiraling around each other.
So
yeah,
fun.
another very magnetic aspect of the biofield in terms of the way that probably a lot of Eileen students would deal with it, and part of my practice revolves around, well, I call them the holes of the donut because people will visualize that well, but it's the terminal points of sort of the battery of our energy that is our energy field, above the head, below the feet. And I noticed that if there was nothing else that I addressed with somebody, that seems like finding those and adjusting them to the optimal centered and balanced location could potentially be the most useful thing I did for them of the whole session in terms of helping them self-correct, because it'll be off to the left, off to the right. And repeating clients, I don't know if this is true for you, Eileen, in your experience, but I noticed that when people come back months later, that adjustment seems to stick pretty well. And another thing that can happen is, like, I have seen people's terminal points or holes of the donut, the entry, exit, swirling energy vortex points above the head, below the feet, again, be in front of the person, where they're actually holding the middle of their energy in front of them and actually kind of making a wall in front of themselves. And these are the people that feel very stuck in life, like they are burdened or crippled with some extreme challenges that they can't get over or get past. And so, like, in terms of the magnetism of it, if there's magnetism going on a subtle energy level and you're putting your magnetic field in front of you, it's almost like an actual force field. that is holding you back in life are almost impenetrable. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that, Eileen.
Well, I call that the heart shield because I will often sort of find it right around the heart. I often find the bulk of it sort of right in front of the heart.
That is accurate from my experience too.
Yeah, it's projecting a false front. It's being inauthentic. It's being like, okay, this is who I have to be in order to be safe, but the real me, because I'm not good enough, or I'm too vulnerable, or I'm damaged, or whatever. So I'm going to create this projection of myself. And it does create enormous stuckness because all your energy has gone into this false projection, and it takes everything you've got just to kind of navigate from there. And it's really about encouraging people to realize that they're safe if they are safe, if they're in a place where they're safe, and helping to just kind of release that whole structure and allow the energy to go where it belongs. When my sons were 6 and 9, I had really bad mid-back pain. And my husband won't pick up a tuning fork. So I started to train my sons to work on me. And one of them, my younger son now, so he's 22, he is a Biofield tuning practitioner. He became one when he was 17. But I asked him when he was 6 and he was learning how to do this. I was like, so tell me what's going on here. And he said, it's taking energy from where it doesn't belong and putting it where it does belong so it can get to work doing what it's supposed to do. And I was like, wow, right, Austin, you kind of that's what you guys are doing.
It's the exact same thing. Yep. Well said.
Right?
Like, that's
well the most brilliant description I've ever heard.
Yep. It's simple and matter of fact. And that's true.
It's simple and matter of fact. And so when energy doesn't belong out here, it's not able to do what it's supposed to do. So you just got to get it back flowing the way that it's supposed to. But Austin, I'm curious about something. So what Chance is describing the battery terminals in the field, like the donut holes where it's going in. Have you ever held magnets in that area? Or do you just always do it on the body? Because I'd be really curious to see what you notice working in the terminal points in the field.
So that's a really interesting question. I don't know that we've ever done it in that fashion, but there is the more esoteric aspect of biomagnetism where we get into remote healing, which is, I would say, 98% of my clients are remote sessions. So there's no physical magnet being placed on a client. I'm actually using a completely inanimate object surrogate to place the pairs, and then I'm visualizing that and then sending the energy. So, and what's very fascinating about all that is that, you can see these real world examples of, I think one of my favorites has been a most recent, I had a girl in Norway who had an allergy to red meat. And so like she could eat really anything else, but the red meat would cause her to break out in hives and experience a mild anaphylaxis. Tongue started to swell, the typical symptoms. And so I wasn't really sure what the outcome was going to look like for her. And after 3 sessions, I got a text message from her mother, and she said, hey, my daughter came back home from this, overseas, and she's back home in the States, and she had red meat for the first time in a couple of years and no reaction at all. And so I found that really fascinating because we're seeing the same effect, except I didn't place anything on her. So again, that goes to the whole idea that it's energy. So to that end, and bring it back home to your question, I've never actually done that kind of outside or off of the body. But I think that would be really interesting and fun to play with. I've been really curious too about this idea that, in a lot of the older text and even in some of like the 80s, messing with magnetism, Albert Roy Davis and Walter C. Rawls were doing a lot of work in the 70s. And so they had their specific opinions about, what the North Pole might do and what the South Pole does. We find that really the body knows best. So it may want a north magnet wherever, and it may want a south wherever. And sometimes those are, we have what I would refer to as standardized pairs, and primarily when Dr. Goiz was, sort of pioneering this therapy, typically what you will see is that black magnets go on the right half of the body. And for us, black is south, and that the red goes on the left half of the body. Which would be north. And of course, there are exceptions, like we only have one spleen, which is on the left. And so, if you were to try and rebalance the spleen, you have to use red and black on the left side. But primarily, if we had, say, a deltoid-deltoid pair, you would see black on the right half of the body and red on the left. But this will be something interesting for me to play with moving forward. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So there's kind of an interesting feature of this that also might inform your work. So what I've found is that sometimes if people have had significant trauma, or if they spent a lot of time and energy or intense energy into being in a contracted state, out of fear, out of being under attack, that sort of thing, then their field gets kind of squunched in, and these energy centers, which should be about, I don't know, 8 to 10 inches sort of away from the body, can end up sometimes with some people like right up between their ankles, or a few inches from. And so part of what we do is we kind of find where it is by moving the fork like away from the head or away from the feet until you get this sort of magnetic grab, like you can feel it, like, right? And then if it's close, then we adjust it and we just very gently sort of pull it out and kind of set it straight, which is a similar kind of thing to, like we said, about adjusting leg length too. Because I often find, because a lot of people I've treated have their legs are imbalanced as well. And it's just about sort of releasing the tension that's in there, right? And then how important it is to kind of get people plumb and square. But I also find that this sort of adjusting and sort of stretching out the field is also important, to just so that you're working in a system that's sort of spread out and relaxed as opposed to in a bunch. So that's just something you can kind of move the magnet, away from the body until you kind of sense the grab.
I would love that. Well, and in fact, what's really interesting and fun about that is, we could muscle test and ask the body, hey, how many inches do you want the magnet away? Or, there's been so many questions that I just never realized, sky is the limit almost when you're asking the field for information, and the body is really just acting as a channel for this rudimentary language we're using. I forget the guy's name, and we always talk about it in our seminars, but and I think I mentioned it maybe on our first podcast chance, but the guy that was working with cactus in like the early 50s, and he was basically trying to see if he could get a cactus to put away its spines. And so every morning he would just go to this cactus and he would ask it, will you put away your spines? And eventually what happened when the new growth started to occur, the cactus was a spineless cactus. And in fact, that's one of the first edible cultivated spineless cactuses. Most people don't know it came from this guy experimenting by just asking it, will you put away your spine? So it's kind of dovetails with, not Dr., but Isaru Emoto, his work with water, and the idea of, intention kind of supersedes the language barrier, that, somehow the energy understands the will or drive behind it. So I think it'd be cool to do that with, asking the body, like how far away can we actually go with this? Because, in remote, there isn't a physical magnet involved. So I think at some point you really ask yourself, like, well, do we really need the magnet at all? Right. You can just use yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
I actually sometimes put the forks down and I just use my hand.
Yeah.
Because in some ways I can find what I'm looking for more easily that way. The forks give other types of information in the way that the sound changes. There's things you can interpret out of the fork that's great, but you could do the whole thing with your body if you were sensitive to your body communicating with you. And what I always do in this, I want everyone to take note and listen up for a moment as I go through this, is that I ask my body to do the whole thing, and I get permission to be connected with their body. It's the life force energy that animates their body and my body, the client and myself, that is actually the dynamic, intelligent, harmonizing centropic force or ordering principle, not just in us, but in the whole cosmos. It's life force energy, whatever that pre-existing spirit is that makes everything move. That's really what it is that does the whole process. And I look at it like my body and your body are communicating to help each body adjust in a healthy way. But you and I, the conscious being, the ego, what have you, we're the translators for them. And in that, in knowing that, you can actually do so much by asking. Like whenever I I've had in my life in the past, and this is how I really dealt with it, bladder control issues, in the sense of like I need to go to the bathroom in emergency for like 0 to emergency too fast and too often. So I'd always be like uncomfortable squirming because, you know, it's not a good time to go to the bathroom and I don't have a moment. And what I realized is asking bladder, talking directly to bladder and saying, could you just tighten up a little bit and just relax? I mean, tighten up, but also relax, because we really want that. You know, it's too elastic. It's starting to be uncomfortable. Anyway, whatever the case may be, you can ask your body to do things. And what I would like people who have a moment and are listening right now, we're talking about these holes of the donut, these terminal points of your arc field, the battery. The picture that I had up of the torus field here is an approximation of what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a bad one because it's too small. You need a better one, Chance.
I know. It's a quick Google image search and it's no good, but you know, it's not good. I'll just put that away. But I want people listening to just for a moment, let's take a second and let's adjust those terminal points to the ideal position. Because what I do with a client all the time is I almost over explain what it is I'm about to do. And I tell them up front, like, if I'm explaining a lot of what I'm doing or about to do, and it sounds technical, I'm actually really more talking to your body and it hears what we want. You're like, yes, I trust this idea. I'm going to go with it. You're allowing it. And then your body does the adjustments. So right now listening, if you want, you know, if you heard us talking about these terminal points above the head, below the feet, and you'd like to feel like they're adjusted, I'm going to adjust them both right now for anyone that wants to, with this sound being the medium, the sonic slider being the medium that allows it to happen. So if you agree to this, it can happen. And also if you maybe even do a little scanning and sensing into your field and imagine the shape of this toroidal field. And as I hit the forks, we'll start with the top one and then we'll do the bottom one. Just imagine this terminal point or the opening of this vortex shape being 8 to 10 inches above your head and aligned with your spine. And then the below one, 8 to 10 inches below your feet, aligned with the spine, right in the middle. So we'll just take a moment and do that for everybody. You're totally able to make this shift without anything other than knowing what you want it to be and getting into the feeling of it happening, you know. So here we go. We're going to adjust the top one now. All right. I felt that one click into place. And now we'll do the one below the feet. 8 to 10 inches below the feet, aligned with the spine. All right, guys, I felt it click. And that's what I was looking for, just like I would with anybody else. So, you know, just have the faith and trust that adjustments to your biofield can be that easy. And we have all the power to take such radical responsibility for our energy that there's no reason not to. Now, I really liked what you said, Eileen, about your son as like a 6-year-old, describing so accurately the energetics of that situation. And I had this question in my back pocket for both of you, but definitely for Eileen. It's been life-changing for me to have access to the biofield anatomy, to recognize when I'm trying to have it both ways, that the back of my ankle will hurt, and to look at where I'm trying to have it both ways and make the connection and then immediately feel relief in the sore ankle, you know, things like that, just really quick. And I wanted to know what you think the future could be like for humanity, or maybe just in a micro scale, what it would be like for, you know, what it has been like for your kids, for example. You know, because I'm thinking about the future. I want to be a dad, and I'm imagining what kind of a human being would you be creating if from a young age, every boo-boo they got, they stopped and reflected about their emotions and their beliefs and tried to connect the dots as to why they got the injury. Do you think, how have your kids been with their knowledge of the biofield? Do they have as dramatic of injuries or accidents or mishaps, or do they tend towards smaller things occurring that they then make adjustments on?
Well, a few things. First of all, I just want to thank you for being the one who is wielding tuning forks and doing the adjustment in this gathering. And it wasn't me.
As you have to do that.
Michael,
So
I would
often.
never be doing it without learning from you, though. So thank you, Sensei.
And it's been really interesting. Both of my boys are very cautious. I'm the rare mother that had two sons that never ended up in an emergency room, knock on wood, no broken bones, no crazy accidents. They're both extremely conservative and sort of restrained, and they're just not wild. But because of the way they grew up with this understanding, right? And so much of biofield tuning is really emotional intelligence. It's really understanding that, like, oh, my left shoulder hurts. What am I sad about? Right. Like, just like you were saying, Chance, because they understand that. And I think that, but it's sort of baked into them, maybe not in a cognitive way, but enough to feel into their own body when they're going into imbalance and to correct themselves. And actually, my 22-year-old just started dating a 36-year-old woman who is just astonished by his degree of emotional intelligence and ability to communicate. And that he's really become skilled in that as a biofield tuner, and being in people's fields and listening deeply and understanding what's going on. He's had to do a lot of work because back before I understood these things, he had a massive febrile seizure right after he got his 9-month vaccinations. And it really was very traumatizing and really changed his personality. He was 10 months old, and I thought I had given birth to Buddha. I was like, this child is Buddha. And then he turned into a demon beast child after this seizure, and couldn't handle things. It was just so cooked from seizing and then being given drugs and a spinal tap and all kinds of stuff. So going through his life, like early behavioral problems and things like that, he has had to become extremely self-aware about his own tendency to go dysregulated and how to reel himself into regulation, which actually has made him a really good therapist working with young people who suffer from the same kind of things, same kind of challenges. But I think tuning and tuning forks really helped get him straightened out. Like, I helped from the outside and then helped him to help himself from the inside. And that's really the essence of the work. Because if you come to see me and your right hip hurts because, like you were saying, Chance, your inner critic and your to-do list is just running, I can adjust that for you. But if you don't start to mind your own mind, you're going to have to just keep coming back to me to fix you. I don't want to do that. I'm like, yeah, I showed you what's going on in your own head. Now you got to keep yourself sorted and like stay in the present moment and stop indulging that to-do list.
And then it's coming back to asking for it. The mind is like any other aspect of body in that sense that I advise people, okay, you've got this to-do list running. Now I want you to ask your mind for notification, because the mind is great at pattern recognition and it loves games. Ask it to notify you when you're running the to-do list torture. And then when you get the notification, then you get to make the decision, oh, I don't need to spend mental energy on this right now. Just relax and do what I'm currently doing.
Yeah,
And
well, that's what the pain is
like
for,
that.
right? I mean, the pain is that twinge, like, hey, something's out of balance, right? That's but it would maybe you'd be much better off having your mind tell you than having to experience pain to realize that you're not in a balanced place. Yeah, I wanted to share. You made me think of something, just kind of along these lines. Sometimes I like to eat dark chocolate, like creamy dark chocolate kind of stuff. And I've noticed that when I do that I tend to get mucusy, that it kind of makes me mucusy. And so I went to bed the other night and I was feeling kind of mucusy because I eaten some truffle thing. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to command my body to not be mucusy. And I was like, and so I basically just said, I am not mucusy. And I realized that there was kind of like almost a posture involved in that mucus. And so when I decreed that I wasn't mucusy, I noticed how my spine and my breathing adjusted. And when I did that, when I changed my posture and I changed my breathing, the mucus went away instantly.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense, man.
It's very yeah, it's very similar, Eileen, to, you know, Joe Dispenza. Like, you know, we have this innate power to, you know, we're never taught how to cultivate it. So it's almost like we're all in diapers really figuring this stuff out. I think at some point in the distant past, it was very well understood. And for whatever reason, it has been lost and then rediscovered again. But that's really a fantastic testimony and a really cool story. So yeah,
right. And I was kind of like doing a magnet thing on myself in a way.
Well,
right?
that's because we're magnets.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. We
like connected the magnet. Oh, no more mucus.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. You are the magnet. So that's fantastic. Totally. Eileen, I did want to ask you, I've always been curious about this. What was it for you that made you determine or decide, you know, say with like the 174 Hertz fork, that was going to be sort of the bread and butter, you know, and moving forward, obviously you've got a lot more, you know, in your tool belt now, but was that something that you had, you know, just played around with and discovered, well, this one seems to cut through the noise better, or was there a more spiritual aspect to your, you know, reason why you chose 174 or 528?
More practical than that.
Okay, I just, you know, was just curious. So
yeah, no, just experimentation. So my first set was the C major scale, and I used that for a while. And then after a while using that, I started feeling like I needed an additional set. I started feeling like I needed some new frequencies. And so I went online, and I don't know what year this was, 2005, something like that, 2004. And I went online and I looked, and even back then there was like a dizzying array of tuning fork sets. And I was like, well, I don't know what one to pick. So I closed the computer and I was like, God, I know I need new forks, but I don't know what I need. Can you figure it out? Right. And so then the weirdest thing happened. Okay. So over the course of the next week, I had 3 people bring up the solfeggio set to me. One of my girlfriends said to me, she sends me a text. She's like, hey, I just met somebody using solfeggio tuning forks. Have you ever heard of them? And I was like, no. And then somebody else messaged me, and they're like, I just watched this video on YouTube about solfeggio tuning forks. Have you ever heard of them? And I was like, yes, actually, just a couple days ago. And then, honest to God, this happened. I met a girlfriend for lunch, somebody I hadn't seen in a while. And we sit down, and she pulls a book out of her bag and puts it on the table. And she said, this practically jumped off the shelf as I was leaving the house. I think you need to read it. And it was called The Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. And it was the story of how Leonard Horowitz allegedly had these solfeggio frequencies revealed to him because it was like hidden in the Bible or something. I was like, okay. And the solfeggio set is based on 3s. Yeah. So there it is.
Yeah. I made an infographic about it. I'll put it in the Vibrant Telegram chat.
I was just studying this last week. I can't believe you dropped that name today. That's so awesome.
The universe and synchronicities, you know.
Yeah, lining up.
Wild,
how I got into solfeggio forks is I started with the solar harmonic C to C set, worked with it for like a week or 2, and then the set literally disappeared. And I was like, okay, well, I had been 50-50. Should I do solfeggio or solar harmonic? The solar harmonic vanished. So
that's weird.
You know, I sucked it up and bought another set of forks, and I got the solfeggio, and I really like it.
Okay, so I used that 9-piece solfeggio, and after a while, I decided I really didn't like the C scale. It sounded kind of dumb and muddy and dulling, whereas the solfeggio tones are very bright. And I liked all of them except for the 285, which would never ring right for me. It was always sounded diminished and sort of frustrating to me. But what I found was, of all of those frequencies, that the 174 was the most useful. It was the one that I could hear the most, right? So I learned the language of vibration by bouncing sound off of, you know, thousands of people now. And the 174 is really the fork that taught me that language, because information just comes through. When you get up into the higher frequencies, it's not as easy to discern the patterns in the overtones and undertones. But then I went through a period where I was breaking my forks, which I talk about in my book. I had went through this very sort of strange spell of destroying forks. It's such an odd thing. So I was trying to write my book, Tuning the Human Biofield, while being a mom and seeing clients and teaching classes. So I was trying to do all of it at the same time. And I had been using the solfeggio set, and I'd found that the 174 would wear out. And I had been through a couple, they had lasted about 6 months. And the guy replaced at MetaVibe, who's my manufacturer now, replaced the first one. But the second one, he's like, these forks aren't designed to be used the way you're using them, because they get into heavy portion, right? And you're going through and you hit some traumatic memory, and the force going like wow, wow, it's making all these sounds that it doesn't make if you're just like tuning the instrument, you know? So
you're digging, and that's just a little
so they were getting metal fatigue and just basically like losing their integrity and falling apart. So then what happened was I went through the stage where a fork only lasted, it blew out after 2 months, then 1 month, then 2 weeks, then 1 week. And then it actually got to the point where every time I picked up a tuning fork to use it, I destroyed it. It was so freaking bizarre. Like I would teach classes and people were like, you can't touch my forks, because I kept on being out of them, you know, the other forks more. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And it finally got to the point where, you know, when I had that one that just died within an hour, I was like, I'm putting the forks down. Like something is trying to tell me something here, and I have to put the forks down and stop. And really, I mean, I think it was some part of my higher self knows how to destroy metal immediately, because I needed to take a break from seeing clients and really focus on my book. Like the only way that I was going to write that book was if I was completely incapable of seeing clients. And that's what it took, because I would have, you know, I'm such a knucklehead. I would have just kept on going on trying to do it all, you know, and then my book would have been super
I believe
late.
they call that bothism. It's a Libra thing. I have it too.
One of my favorite words.
I'm also a fellow Libra, so.
So here we are balancing.
I know, right?
Yeah, so it was a very strange thing, but it's what led to me to make my own custom alloy, that stands up to it. It's both stronger and more flexible, so it handles the distortion better. And as soon as I finished writing my book and I went back to my practice, I stopped breaking forks. And I got these new alloys too, but the whole it just stopped. So isn't that weird? That like,
oh sure, well that's like a universe trying to give you the message, right?
Yes.
and sometimes for the more stubborn folk out there, it takes a little more nudging. So,
like, you must stop.
Universe was like,
yeah,
you
can't.
Forks,
Yeah,
you
why
run
are
out
you
of
doing
money
this?
to buy new forks,
Yeah.
or until you quit for a while. When that was going on, did you notice? Were you doing remote sessions at all then, or was that before remote sessions came out?
I was doing remote sessions then too. Yeah, I started doing remote sessions in I think 2011, and I was writing the book in 2013.
Because I'm still, who isn't, but I'm still fuzzy about like what is or isn't different, or is there anything different about remote sessions and in-person sessions? And you're talking about hitting that heavy torsion in someone's energy field with the fork, and then that can mess up the metal. And in a remote session, they're not physically there. Is there a heavy torsion there, or is the fork reacting without the actual resistance, but it's still doing something different, having to do with your body's electricity? All of that is kind of like the question in dowsing. Is it your electricity in your hands that causes the dowsing rods to react, or is it the electricity or magnetism in the environment, or is it some combination of all that? All of these questions are
you're assuming separation.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, part of that.
That's the answer right there.
For us, at least, I mean, obviously we would all love to know everything there is to know about everything. Right. But, for us, we try to at least have a framework to discuss it in some way. Otherwise, everything is ambiguous and then everything is nothing. But, in a way, it's like, the idea of quantum locking or somehow this energy, everything is really not distanced or separate. But to kind of answer your question in a way, at least from my own observation and experience, Chance, I would say that there are cases where I have seen miraculous turnaround after just one session. And then there are some times where maybe it takes 3 or 4 or 5. And I think there's that relationship. I don't necessarily assign that to myself as the facilitator per se, but that maybe that energy exchange just needs a little extra hug, and maybe that hug has to happen once or twice before it recorrects itself. But then other people may be a little more eager. And so with the remote, the case in Norway, I think, was really the big kicker for me because, I could give you other examples of remote healing cases that I've done. I had a lady with calcium deposits in her shoulder, very painful, wants to be active in this and that. And, and she can't really, range of motion is an issue. And we're doing a remote session. She's in North Carolina. So, nowhere near where I am. And, and it took a few sessions, but then we started to see a reduction in the calcium deposit. So then you have to ask this philosophical question. Is it because she believes that something is happening that causes the body to respond? Or is my energy interacting with her energy? To be determined, I guess. The point, I guess, at the end of the day for all of that is that we're trying to see a positive shift so that somebody can have a better quality of existence in that regard. I don't know that for me, I've ever seen that magnets are more powerful in person versus remote. I think a lot of that depends on the interaction of the energy, kind of like you were talking about, Eileen, with, resonating. When somebody's in a bad mood, if you're not managing your own stuff, you may start to resonate. And then you're both in this like really awful position. So I don't know if I fully answered that, but I was just kind of on the vibrant, right?
That's what we're here for. What I really like to tell clients before we kick off into a session is, especially if they're kind of newer to the modality, or maybe someone recommended it to them and they don't really know anything about it, which happens. Hello, dogs. I like to tell them that it's a very fun process to have experiential knowledge, that separation and distance are mental concepts. That doesn't mean they aren't real, but it means that they begin and end in the mind, really. And so they're as real as your mental concept holds them up to be, in a way. And at the point where I hit the first tone and they feel something in their feet, right, that's where it's no longer theoretical that we are all connected in this. I consider it to just be the universal mind. I think that's the simplest way to conceive of it. When you get into the way people talk about ether, I like those conversations, but I also hear so much contradictory terminology, and I like precision language. So I don't really see a medium of exchange going on that the light or the sound or the intention is traveling through. I see it more like the life force energy or animating spirit is the inseparable allness that everything is generating through or in. And so if that animating spirit is the same I am energy in me and in them, then there's no actual boundary between the vessels in terms of that particular flow. It's like, another way to look at it is with water, that in varying degrees of density, everything is in water, underwater. You know what I mean? Which is pretty amazing. And especially when you think about alternate cosmological frameworks that, like in the biblical sense, the water's above, which makes a lot of, to me, fits more with what it looks like when you actually zoom in on stars and see them wiggling their light at you as if they're coming through a pool, under like a pool light, in a swimming pool.
Right. Well, and I guess to some degree, plasma has that same sort of framework of behaving, or can behave more like a liquid.
Can we talk about plasma? And as you, Austin, and Eileen understand it, that's a really good topic to wheel around, I think.
Sure. Yeah. How do you want to? Yeah.
Maybe give us your, let you both take turns explaining how you understand plasma, because it is by its nature, it's literally nebulous. So,
I mean,
it's
that is
helpful to
true.
have these mental frameworks or scaffoldings of understanding and thought, because a lot of intentional success can ride on having a sort of a map mentally of the process. In my opinion, I think that's helpful for whether you want to call it placebo or manifestation or whatever.
Right.
So I can take a stab at that question. So when you say the universal mind, right, I tend to think of it as ether as the container that, God said, let there be light, and the sound waves traveling through, right? They need a medium to travel through. And so the ether is the one. And then when vibration is introduced in it from source, right, whatever is inducing vibration, that vibration creates charge separation. And so traveling waves moving through the ether separate into positive and negative charges through torsion, right? So the spinning, there you go. Yeah, exactly. So the movement of waves is a spin, right? Is torsion. And so basically ether spins itself, or is spun into plasma. And it's just the next sort of layer down of movement of charge. It's the sound and the mass and the light and everything traveling in this sort of phase of being of positive and negative, the crest and the trough, the movement of the spiral. So what is plasma but movement of charge? And so it shows up in all kinds of ways, right? So there's like dark current mode, which is our atmosphere, or neon light that doesn't have extra charge running through it. So it's a plasma. Even our air that we're breathing is plasma in dark current mode. And then there's glow mode, where you get like northern lights, or or a neon light is glow mode of plasma. And then there's I can't think of what the next word is, but when you get like sparks or lightning bolts, right? Then it's in a current. So plasma, and it also will form sheaths. So the plasma bubbles, right, will form sheaths as well. And that's it's a flow. It's basically ether that's moving. And so matter precipitates, but ultimately it's all light, right? It's all this clear light that just spins itself into more and more complex arrangements. So then plasma will turn into gases, and gases will densify down into liquids, and then that will turn into solids. But it's just denser and denser and denser spun light, right? So it's all ether, and it's all one thing. And it is all the the universal mind. And all of these fluctuations are always arising and falling in it, right? It's like soil or water or ether. It's all the same thing. And it's all giving rise to life. And then life falls back into it. And then, the one turning into the many, and then the many turning back into the one. So that's the way I see it, right? So there's absolutely no separation, because it's all instant knowing. You don't need to have, in a distance session, nothing is traveling, it's just resonating.
I mean, I got nothing to add to that. That is exactly what I would have said. So, yeah, Walter Russell, baby.
Walter Russell is definitely very useful to read.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, we're at the end of the day, we're all really working with the same stuff. And I've given this analogy before too, that in our conferences, we of course have all different walks of life, different medical backgrounds, moms, whoever, veterinarians, everybody that is interested in something that is not mainstream. So we get a lot of people that have all these other different approaches to health, whether it be, ozone or DMSO or, all these different things. We're really, at the end of the day, trying to use tools to make our life experience here in this realm better, and to me, that's really the most important thing. It's already tough enough as it is. so it's like, anything that we can do to bolster that quality in my opinion, is the best way to roll. So, but yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, Eileen, everything is light, really. I mean, condensed or otherwise. What do you
And
think,
it can be
Chance?
created and destroyed.
I like all that. Well, I want to know if Gabriel's got any questions for the panel or observations to throw their way. I'm sure he does. The dude usually does.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I want to ask, I'm not very well versed in these frequencies and these, musical terminology. I'm more of a percussionist myself. But what experience have you guys had, or even in your research or reading, around what they call the devil's tone, or that F sharp, the tone of dissonance? Has that come up anywhere? Have you guys read about that at all? What can you speak on that?
I would say that it has come up. I have read about it. I have heard about it, but I haven't spoken of it. So I can't speak to it intelligently. Like if I'm going to speak to something, I have to read it in depth. I have to write about it. I have to really spend time with it in order to respond. If I've just come across something and read it a while ago and just, there isn't sufficient information in me to respond. Maybe Austin can.
I'm going to sound like the dumb musician because I actually have played in band years ago, played in bands. And I have heard of the Devil's Tone. F sharp is actually one of my favorite kind of, for the rock crowd. But I don't know in terms of like what effect it may have. I'm kind of in the camp with Eileen on that. I don't know that I'm well versed enough to really throw my 2 cents in terms of, what I think is happening there or whatever. But I do find like the topic's interesting to me. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And it has other names. Like you mentioned, you prefer to call it F sharp,
Right.
But then it has other names also. Do you know what those other names are?
I do not. Don't even get me lying. Yeah, I have no idea.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm just brushing up against it recently in my work. I'm digging into the Enneagram and finding it to be present in many things. And apparently there are ways to also the devil's interval. Yes. And I'm finding that the symmetry of it expresses in the Enneagram in a very fascinating way. And I'm just finding this Enneagram kind of popping up everywhere the longer I look at it. And now all of a sudden the solfeggio is coming up in the conversation. Harmony is really important right now, finding harmony with the self. And I'm always on the lookout, I'll tell a quick story. I experienced some maleficia firsthand one time, some dark influence in a really interesting way. I'm a practicing martial artist, lifelong, all my life, and it was about 10 years back. I was in so my art right now is capoeira. It's Afro-Brazilian dance fighting, and I was invited into a tribe that is very prolific, large tribe in Denver, and they're the barefoot, high-flying acrobatic tribe, and they're very like machismo. And the leader of their clan is like he's got a reputation, and he kind of challenged me right before the dance got started because I was wearing shoes in his circle, and he didn't like that I had shoes on. And he called me out in front of everybody. It was like the record scratched. And he's like, "Yo, man, what are you doing here?" I was like, my buddy invited me. It was really awkward. And I had to convince him that my shoes were sacred, that I wasn't wearing just street shoes, that these are my sacred shoes, and that they're special. And he's like, "Yeah, all right." And then he waits like an hour and a half till I wear myself out and I'm all nice and winded, and he stops the music and he calls me in for a one-on-one session. And so I'm dance fighting with the master, and he is testing me out. And he, long story short, he put a hex on my knees. And I didn't know it when it happened. He did this crazy ninjutsu move on one knee, and then he put the ninjutsu move on the other knee. And I didn't know what he had done. And it was about 10 minutes later when we wrap it up and I'm walking out of the circle, my knees are not going into place. And I can't really walk right for some reason. But he didn't hit me. But he put the Maleficia on me. And now, today, as we're talking about tones and vibrations and frequency and the ether and the plasma, I'm wondering, it just dawned on me as we're talking, I think he adjusted his berimbau. I think he changed his musical instrument before he brought me into the circle. And then he might have changed the vibration of the whole entire ritual. And then after he and I got
especially
done,
if he's the head of the group. And I say that because there's ancient civilizations, Chinese dynasties did this, the Egyptians did this, where when a new ruling family took over, they'd actually, they'd find the length of the forearm of the new ruler, and that would be the new royal foot, so to speak. And then they would adjust like the tonal center that all the official music was played in to be a flute of that length, and a lot of various units of measurement that would be based on the the ratios in the human body. They based it on the ratios in that guy's body, who was the ruler. So
right.
This is really interesting. I want you to finish what you're saying, but Eileen, I'd love your response on this, because I actually ran into a client session a couple weeks ago where the guy, what he wanted help with was he thought he had black magic done on him. And that really shows up in the left shoulder, left armpit. But Gabriel, finish out this story, and then I would like to know what Eileen thinks about this.
Well,
I think it has a lot to do with the theatrics that generate the belief.
Well, that's kind of the thing that gets me, though, is that, so after that, he goes back, he takes his instrument back, might have put, retuned it back to not kill mode. But what gets me is that it was late onset that it occurred to me, or that the effects sank in. And then it was even another hour later that I could recall the actual move that he did in the heat of the moment in the game to each of my knees.
The body takes some time to adjust itself based on changes in the energy field. So if there was some crystallized belief that even was subconsciously implanted by all the weird little ninjutsu moves he did, that, you might feel it a little later, just like someone who gets a tuning might not feel all the changes for up to 48 or 72 hours.
Right. Yeah. Well, just quickly to interject, this is the same type of phenomenon we see with biomagnetism, where, let's say you have that, inflammation or urinary tract infection, and I place those pairs, you may not see that it feels normal, until the next day, right? There's some sort of lead time that the body takes to recorrect. So.
Or discorrect.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It makes me think of you mentioned this last time, Austin, on the last vibrant you were on, when the oracle says, "Oh, don't worry about that vase." And he says, "What vase?" Mm-hmm. And then he knocks it down, and she says, "The real thing that's going to bake your noodle is, would you have knocked it over if I hadn't said anything?" Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. And that's really such a wonderful short little metaphor for so many things like that. And especially like, in any overlap that we have in both respective fields of biomagnetism and also biofield tuning, this idea of philosophy obviously has to enter, when we're talking about some of these concepts, because we can't, there's not a lot of that concrete aspect where I can't measure exactly how, happy Eileen is. That's a personal perspective. I can't measure exactly how hungry I am. I can maybe describe a little bit of it, but yeah, there's so much of that philosophical idea, which I think for me is part of the gravitation. It's part of the pull because it's fun to chew on. It's fun to think about those ideas. But I think in your case, it's very interesting, right? Is it because he changed the tone, or is it because maybe you weren't aware of it? Like there's a lot happening there that I find very interesting.
Well, how did you fix it?
That's the real question.
I walked funny for 4 months. I was just determined to get myself straightened out, and I just kind of like I always do. I just power through it. I keep going to class. I keep training. Even though I'm injured, I just stay the course. But this is it took about 4 months, and I literally was walking weird for 4 months. It was the strangest. It caused infrapatellar bursitis is how I would describe it. It's like the bursa under my kneecap was swollen for a very long time. But there's another little side effect that is just weird. So his clan, they train in a very high profile location in the art district in Denver, where they have a glass front of the building, and crowds gather when they have class, and there is just a huge posse of people watching this beautiful performing art. And it's like just natural recruiting process. People are really intrigued by what they see. Well, I would walk by his dojo while they're performing, and he would lock eyes with me from outside of the building. And it happened for like 3 months in a row, where he would just beeline look right at me every time. And so I had this joke with my friends. I was like, you guys see this, right? You guys are seeing this. I said, okay, this month we're going to walk by, but we're going to walk by from across the street. We're not going to be on the sidewalk at the front of the building where he can see me easy. We're going to intentionally be across the street. And I wanted all my friends, I was like, everybody watch. When we come into view, his head's going to swivel on. And from across the street, he locks eyes with me. It was awesome. It was awesome. We're quantumly entangled.
Honestly, from my experience, that sounds like attributes of a practicing on purpose psychic vampire or energy vampire.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Someone trained in some
highly accomplished.
The way we can train ourselves in positive, harmonizing, uplifting forms of energy work, there is the opposite. And I had a revelation about this. Like, why is that even possible? Why is psychic vampirism or energy vampirism a thing? And then I realized that it's because when human beings are babies, and really up to like the age of 6 or 7, our energy fields have to be open and almost in a vampiric way, sort of feeding on the energy field of the parents, because we're not fully cooked yet, And so in that case, it's not vampirism. It is willing exchange and, the parents giving energy and helping build up the baby till it kind of creates its own field and boundaries more independently. But most people's expression of energy vampirism or psychic vampirism is relatively unintentional and more of a survival mechanism, unconscious mechanism, in they feel like they're low on energy, and it gives them a good feeling to slam dunk on somebody or, whatever it is that they juice through. But yeah, I think that there are practitioners of more, an art to this type of thing that is maybe what you're describing. But I'm very curious about Eileen's experience with psychic vampirism or hexes or what people will call black magic. And, I know a lot of it is about the belief and the theatrics and how you give your consent by being freaked out by all the weird things that they just did, or that they left the dead chicken under your, car seat or whatever. That's the biggest factor, is that you let them in. You got to let them in. But, this is a very interesting subject. What do you got on that?
Well, I mean, there are definitely things that I've come across in people's fields, like family curses and hexes, and somebody's got a stink eye on them in some way or another. Because we're all connected, and any energy that's sort of directed at you does impact you. When my mind started to become very quiet from just spending hours and hours just listening to forks, I got really trained into an alpha brainwave state. And I could sit in meditation without a single thought for, minutes and minutes. But in that silence, I started to become aware of other people thinking of me. And I could tell when I was sort of getting these things that felt sort of like psychic intrusions. I was like, oh, that person's thinking of me, and then I was like, well, how can I have a quiet mind but not suffer intrusions? And so I started playing around with my imagination and intention to come up with something that would actually create a barrier, right? And I played around with all of the different platonic solids, and none of those worked. And what finally ended up working was, I don't know if you think about a fountain with milk in it. But basically what I did was I put milk in the double layer membrane of my field. And I kind of programmed it. I'm like, okay, my husband and my kids, they can come in through the milk, but everybody else needs to stay out. And I don't know what, and then somebody told me about something in India with this same kind of idea, that there's some other similar thing that for protection. I don't know. Do you guys know what it is? You're thinking of it?
No, I don't, but we do a similar practice, or at least I do whenever, especially for remote. Before I do a session, I do a mental energy protection. Mine looks a little more bizarre in my mind and hard to describe, but it's kind of the same idea. I have these silvery pillars that I kind of set around myself with this shimmery bubble, and I look more like a person that's plugged into the matrix, but outside of this ambiguous sort of silver surfer being that I, envision, are these sort of kind of like the Matrix. You've got all these different wires or fiber optics, like Eileen, you were talking about earlier, fiber optics, that, and it's sort of like a white shimmery thing, and it's just connected to this empty space. And whenever I send energy, I'm essentially telling that outerness, I don't have a word for it, that I need to draw that in so that it doesn't take away from me, and then I need to send it out. And I usually see it coming out of sort of my stomach belly area and going out to whoever I'm working on, but that I said in my mind that nothing else will enter the field unless I allow it, because I'm sovereign. And I have found that when you do that my energy level throughout the day is maintainable. I wasn't doing that before, and you will feel very tired. So, but that's really interesting. The milk. Please continue. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
that was part. Circle around the room with the Palo Santo or sage, but with the door open so that the smoke has a place to flow out. I make a full circle around the room while setting up my intentions in that circle, and state out loud to spirit team. That's what I'll call it. I don't know who may hang around in terms of spiritual guides or ancestors or passed on loved ones, but I just ask if there's any spirit team around, and then the other person's spirit team, I just ask for a circle of protection around us. And I agree that the geometry and the visualization is very powerful, especially if there's a specific instance that you're dealing with, you do feel violated. But it can almost be as simple as just asking for the thing. They'll do it for you.
Yep. That's so true.
I also found when I started doing group sessions that I felt like I needed to have some kind of protection for the whole group. And I played around with that, and then the milk didn't work for the group. But Rose did. And so what I created this whole sort of wall of roses and thorns too, as a kind of energetic protection for the group, and then put program in nobody gets any backwash from anybody else, and it's all protected from any other kind of energies coming in. And so once you create something like that in the ether in your mind, then basically all you need to do is just feed it with a thought for a moment, But I recently had an experience of receiving psychic intrusion that made it through the shield. And that was kind of on the dark side, like what you're talking about. And I was with two other people. We all came under psychic attack at the same time. We all felt the intrusion, and we all had to leave where we were at and go actually do protection together. And that was really wild. I was like, I feel like I'm in a movie. Like, what's going on here? I didn't even really believe in this stuff. And how is this happening? But,
when I need the help, when I really feel like I need extra help, I just go find a tree.
There
and
you
just
go.
like touch the tree, hug the tree. I'm just like, help me out, tree. And it all gets sorted out that way. Or, meditate on the tree.
Yeah, I mean, the tree, they're intelligent and they're connected to.
They're so helpful.
So, yep.
Yeah,
sure.
I first decided that psychic vampirism or energy vampirism was a real thing when I met a self-professed practitioner of it at a party, and across the whole room of the party, he was across the room. I had my back to him, and I felt a sharp jab, like a dart hitting me in the back of the head. Like, it really hurt, but nothing hit me. And I turned around, and the guy was just giving me a creepy smile and staring right at me. And when we made eye contact, he's like, yeah, you felt that?
Oh yeah,
like,
no.
oh, shit.
No, that's
not a good.
Yeah. No,
So that was when I started taking it seriously to have the intention to be protected, to not let people in. And then in terms of ways to think about the unconscious energy vampirism or going through someone else's psychic boundary, everyone out there listening, just ask your mind again, like pattern recognition. That's what mind is good for. It loves to play games. Give it a game. Ask it to look for the pattern of, am I having a mental argument with somebody that's not here? You ever get into that moment of thought where you're just like, and then they would say this, and I would be like, bam, and I totally got them. And then they would try to come back with this, but then I would have this. And you're just having this mental argument, and they're not even there. That is you, in my opinion, that's you intruding on their psychic bubble. So watch out for that. It's just as wasteful of your energy as the to-do list torture we talked about, but then now you're dragging somebody else into it.
It's really true. I have to be really careful about, not thinking about anybody in too concentrated a way unless I want to be pinging them, like someone across the road, I'm like, oh no, they're busy. Like, I'm not going to be like,
yeah.
I'm not in any way.
Yep. That's absolutely true. Well, and we see some of this too with biomagnetism. There's sort of like, the more concrete, theory and practice, and then we get more into the philosophical aspects in biomagnetism, where we are looking at hexes and things like that. And through muscle testing, you're just accessing the energy. And so we've had people in sessions where it was like, say the emotion of lack of love came up. You address that with the client, and they go, well, I've never really felt that way. And then you ask, and you're looking at the feet here, and you'll say, is the client experiencing this lack of love? And you get a neutral or no. And then you go, is this coming from a family? Yes. Right. And the leg will shift. And then you go, oh, okay. Is it coming from the brother, the mother, the father? Okay. So the father's feeling lack of love from your end, or, you start to kind of piece this puzzle together. But the same thing with like hexes, like, oh, I figured out that your aunt didn't want you to do very well in school. Like, why would, you need to either address that with her, or you need to set up energy for yourself so that it's not just like off at you. So I find that to be really interesting too. And then figuring out ways that we can find solutions for a client that are meaningful and that work for them moving forward, so that they're not always dealing with the crazy aunt or whoever is, trying to project these energies that aren't helpful onto that person.
So I know Eileen has a hard out soon, which is totally fine. I mean, we've had a great 2 hours, but I wanted to get maybe like one more topic into the list that was something on my mind. And that is the way that getting ourselves in tune or magnetically balanced, or however we want to conceptualize it, whatever intellectual scaffolding we're climbing on for this process of accessing the ordering principle of life force energy. right? And allowing it to just do what it does. In a way, it's almost like you're just letting it happen. But, you know, when we do that, it's the same ordering principle that brings order or chaos to our life, depending on our inner state. So this is a little message I got from a client who had just plucked up the courage, you know, respectably, to quit a job that they didn't feel good at. But in that interim, had serious self-esteem issues come up when they were unemployed, feeling not optimistic, feeling like, you know, challenge moving forward. They came and got a tuning, well, remotely got a tuning. And he says, I'm feeling so different since our session on Saturday. I feel lighter. I feel like my chest is lighter. I'm breathing easier. And most importantly, I'm feeling optimistic and more energetic. And then a job I really wanted contacted me back. So it looks like I won't have to take another job that I don't really want. So, you know, I bring up this message because I love to hear this, how getting ourselves in tune or harmonious in our energy field actually changes what experiences life serves up to us. And I wanted to see if Eileen could speak to that and maybe any, you know, examples of how that may play out, or you've seen that play out.
Well, you know, there's a meme going around that says your vibe attracts your experience. Okay. I would make that even more simple. Like, your vibe is your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whatever your vibe,
true.
that's your experience. And, you know, wherever you go, there you are. And we exist in the space between each other. So if I'm feeling bent, I'm going to have a bent experience with you, especially if you're a little bent, and we're going to get really bent together, right? So,
and then you have bent plural. I played Scrabble today, and bent, B-E-N-T-S, plural, is actually allowed.
Yeah,
is it really?
I've been playing a bunch of Scrabble lately, and I'm questioning some of those words on the internet that are Scrabble words.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you've really worked to make yourself neutral and present and curious and compassionate and, you know, in integrity, then wherever you go, those are going to be your interactions. People are going to see that, they're going to feel that, they're going to respect that. You're going to create relationships and experiences in integrity. And if something is out of integrity because a strong coherent signal overtakes a weak incoherent signal, you're just going to kind of roll coherency with you wherever you go, because your field is so strong, it just inspires that in the people around you. That's your experience, right? Like, when I drive, I do this thing. I learned I could do it in California. You can't really do it in Vermont because there's 2 lanes, but in California there's 4 or 5 lanes. I figured out how to create bubbles around me, where there'd be like mad traffic in front of me and mad traffic behind me, and I'd just be in this bubble in the middle with like nobody near me, because I would just extend my field out and kind of create, you know, stuff would break through here and there, but I could get really good, like, long distances traveling in this bubble. And even when I'm just driving around town, like, I never have any kind of like stuff, because I radiate such a coherent bubble that is my experience, right? So wherever you got going on, that's what life is going to be for you. And the more clear and light and coherent and grounded you become, that just becomes your experience. And then you inform other people to be that way. Yeah. Austin,
you want to weigh in on that?
I would also agree. And I think, too, working especially with clients who have, I mean, what I would classify most of the time as either chronic, diseased states, right? Things that look like Lyme disease or fibromyalgia that just tend to linger for years and years and years. In fact, I was just having a discussion today about this idea of, to touch on that, your experience is your vibe and all that. But when you have certain people who start to identify with their disease, and then they have developed a psychological aspect to this whole disorder where now they get attention. So it's positive reinforcement with a negative state. And, Dr. Bob Beck talked about how that was, essentially secondary gain syndrome as we would know it today. It goes by many different names, but yeah, they end up having this identity that is their experience. And they, in a lot of cases, they don't want to change it. And when Bob Beck was working with, and this was back in the 80s when he was working with, supposed AIDS patients and cancer, that, he would get these outcomes where they would get better. And then certain people just couldn't mentally handle it. They had already been given the death sentence. They were supposed to die and they were getting ready for that. And they're getting all this attention and meals getting brought to the house. And then when they get better, all of a sudden now I have to be a productive adult again and I can't take it. And so, there were those unfortunate cases where some of those people committed suicide. But it's like they wanted it in a way. They wanted to identify and have that as their experience. And I'm not here to judge that. I mean, that's unfortunate that it went that way. But yeah, if you're actively seeking to better your experience, even if it can be a struggle, right? So like Gabriel with the, 4 months of walking around, but you're still persistent, and like, chances are your outcome is going to change because you are shifting the way and your perspective to see it in a different way. The body's going to in turn, even if it's subtle and even if it takes, 2 or 3 years or however long it takes, that perspective is going to physically manifest into a reality that looks more in line with what you're trying to reflect. And then of course that negative experience becomes part of an empowering positive experience moving forward where you can reflect on it and say, oh yeah, I went through this time, but I learned from it. And
all
of course,
things serve good.
Exactly. And as we see in nature, everything has to go
just for a
through
second?
this.
I want to respect Eileen's time.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm realizing we're pretty
Great,
much
I gotta
there.
go get my husband at the airport. I haven't seen him in a month, so I need to get going. But you guys carry on. I'll check out the end of the recording. It was great to meet you both. And Chance, thanks for having me. I always love hanging out, talking about this sort of thing. And bye to everyone who's been watching. All right.
Thanks for hanging out, Eileen. Biofieldtooling.com. And there's a lot of other things to access there. So go explore, pick up a sonic slider, read her books. Learning the biofield anatomy can be the thing that helps you communicate with your body at the level that maybe prevents any need for serious injuries or disease going forward because you address things as they come up incrementally.
That's right. Excellent, Chance. Thank you very much. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Pleasure to meet you, Eileen.
All right. Now it's just the boys. She's the best though. Only person in the world who I would actually not jokingly call my guru.
Well, I probably won't stick around too much longer. I've got to be back in class at 7:45 tomorrow sharp to try.
Yeah, man, you jump out whenever. Why don't you,
up.
if you got closing thoughts, go for it. And I'm going to hang back after you take off with Gabriel and let him empty some of his thoughts out because he gets a lot in there, and hang out with the chatters and extend to the fun of this being my birthday a little longer.
Yeah, I know. And happy birthday, by the way. That's really cool, and I'm glad that I got to be a part of it and that we got to do this. And Gabriel, I could probably listen to a lot more of the spell casting stuff. I find it absolutely fascinating how language and the way that we put meaning on things and these, like you were talking about earlier, kind of creep in. If
you want to join the shared learning experience, it's Slick Dissident on YouTube.
Okay, cool.
You will find your mind twisting in ways that dip your toes into the waters that the mystic swims in and the schizophrenic drowns in. It's really more than dipping your toes in. You're getting baptized.
Okay, well, fair enough. You know what? I'll take a deep dive. That's fine with me. I'll be sure to follow you.
Nice,
I really appreciate you having me on, of course, Chance, and I would just encourage people that if anybody that is listening that is curious and is dealing with a health issue, you might consider biomagnetism as being one of those tools to help recorrect or address, because in a lot of cases where I've really had experience to see that there are people who deal with very serious health issues that you really do need to have kind of a 1-2 punch in a way. You sort of have to approach it where you want to support the body, but you also are, I've said this ad nauseum at any of our seminars that we're teaching. It's less about being a healer and it's more about being a good detective. I'm really trying to look for, why is this happening?
That is so true.
And that really at the base of it is what I'm there for. Otherwise, why am I even asking the body questions if not to find an answer? Right. And so you're trying to Bruce Wayne the shit out of it, so to speak, right? Be the world's greatest detective. And
it's tricky because you're wanting to get in the zone where the intuitive answer just pops in without prompting, without over constructing an assumed, description of what it is.
Right.
Because this is like halfway through the session, you start to get some clues. They tell you some things about their life, as you discover things going on in their field. And at that point, you're like, well, now I have pieces of data for A, B, and C, and you start cobbling those together and they become assumptions rather than intuitions. And there's kind of like an interesting line that you surf there, not putting too much of your own bias into it and just letting what it is pop in.
Right. Pop in. Exactly. And I think too, for us, even though, like I said, there is some of that gray area about like what a pathogen is, why do we see infection? What does all that really mean? What I can tell you from my experience is that, there are people who are sick with real things, right? To me, it doesn't matter if a virus exists or not, whether or not transmission of a bacteria is actually occurring. And like, while that stuff interests me on the side, my main focus here is that I really want to be able to see that the body has a way to turn around so that I can go, yes, these pairs that I was placing, if I have, 100 people who show up with, a strep throat test, right? I use the strep throat example, but let's say they all show up with strep, or they have a staph infection on their leg, right? And we can kind of culture it and look at it. And I have pairs that relate to that. And then I place those pairs for the proper amount of time. And then we see that the rash dissipates. That's really all for me that matters, right? Is that we take a chronically diseased state and we allow the body to shift back to normal. And that really is much more difficult when we're looking at things like cancer. And also things like Lyme, which, in traditional Western medicine is classified as just one, quote unquote pathogen or infection. And for us, it tends to be a bigger deep dive, and emotions are heavily involved in things like Lyme and cancer as well. So yeah, all that to say, if any of you out there are struggling with health issues, I think it would be worth considering. And of course, I'm a little biased because I do practice, but I have a passion for helping people. So that's kind of my life's call now. And, we talked about in the last podcast about my late wife had cervical cancer, and I have had to walk that road, and it is a horrible thing to have to walk. I would never wish that on anybody. And so I think, there's value to be gained from the lessons that I learned that helps me to be a better therapist moving forward, so that somebody else doesn't have to experience what I did. But here we are with the broken vase, right? Would I be able to be as effective if I hadn't had that experience? So in a way, I'm trying to transform, and of course, awful situation into something that can be positive so that other people don't have to see that side of experience. Yeah. Anyway, so thank you both for having me on. It was fun. Yeah.
Hey buddy, it's great to have you on. And if you're ever hanging out on a Wednesday night and you enjoy the topic, just shoot me a message. Maybe we can get you a surprise call in. We do a lot of those. Yeah. Gordy,
I would love it.
Send you a link if you want to jump on. Gordy, calling Gordy, paging Gordy. So Austin, you're going to take off, man?
I am. I thought somebody was asking a question, or they tried to.
Yeah, PK wanted to know about magnets, about the North and South poles. He says, when you say South Pole, do you mean it's attracted to magnetic north? And maybe PK now will clarify that question a little more if that helps.
Yeah, so this is a question that we go over quite extensively in the courses, and there's a lot of confusion about, especially in magnet therapy, there's a lot of confusion just due to the fact that there's really no regulation. So a lot of terms can be used really in any sort of gray territory format that most manufacturers or people trying to sell a therapy want to use them. The way that we are using our magnets, and I'll bring one back out for demo. So when we're referring to North Pole, and we use the red side to indicate north. You'll see online some people use black for the north, but that's not how we do it in biomagnetism. When we're discussing north or north facing, if we really dissect the way that magnetic fields behave, opposites attract. So when we refer to the North Pole is actually a magnetically south pole. And then the South Pole is actually a magnetically attracting North Pole. So there's a lot of ambiguity in these terms because now we have something that's labeled north, but in magnet terms, it's actually a south, right? So it's a little bit confusing. And then you further convolute the conversation by throwing in other terms like positive and negative. Which really can only describe flow of electrons, which static magnets have no electricity running through them per se. Hello, Gordy.
Hey, good to meet you.
You too. And so, you'll hear a lot of terms like, North Pole negative or South Pole positive. But again, if you don't have current running through something, then that term doesn't actually apply. So these terms have sort of been hijacked in order to help sort of describe a thing, when really what we should be paying more attention to is how the body behaves in the presence of a north magnetic field and a south magnetic field, which is really a descriptive term to describe clockwise flow of a field gradient and a counterclockwise flow. So North Pole.
Cody just described that centripetal and centrifugal.
Right.
Nice one. Cody knows some shit.
Right.
He should be up here.
Right. And so, these ideas of positive and negative are really just a descriptive way, but they can be very confusing for people, especially if you're, not nerdy like me and you're trying to, teach people about field gradients and whatever else. And then of course it's also confusing because there are, forums online and things that you can find where they're describing the South Pole of a magnet as positive and that will actually encourage growth or inflammation and that you only want to use the negative side of a magnet. In my experience, that's all nonsense. And sometimes the body will ask for a placement that you didn't fully expect. So a lot of times we're actually using the north side or the red side for things like trauma. So like if you hit your hand with a hammer, I'm actually going to be using the red side where traditional magnet therapy would say, no, you need to use the south side to draw away the inflammation. We're actually trying to encourage the inflammation because that's the body's normal process. It's bringing blood flow to that area to help heal it. So we're going to facilitate that. And then typically for us in biomagnetism, what we're doing, I want to incorporate the bladder then to help drain the inflammation once that process has accelerated. So we sort of do this dance where I'm going to apply and encourage the body's inflammatory process in the area of trauma. And then I'm going to use the black magnet to drain it to the bladder so that we can pee out the inflammation, so to speak.
Wow, that is cool.
Interesting that it a lot of this is coming back to movement too. I've noticed the vibe and movement, all is vibration idea,
Yes.
And
when I get talking to stuck energy for someone that's like their main, most challenging thing, and they identify it and move it through shifting their belief or whatever is necessary, often they have to, all of a sudden they have to pee.
Yeah.
That happens all the time.
And generally every session, before we have somebody, typically they're going to be on the table for 2 hours. I'll make sure that they hydrate before, but they need to pee before the session. And then they typically always really have to pee after the session. And largely that's due to, if we talk about the science behind biomagnetism and we're actually looking at what's physically occurring, there are some videos you can find on YouTube of Dr. Goiz doing a dark field microscopy where he's showing, they did a blood sample of a lady who was in poor health before biomagnetism. And then you get to see what the red blood cells are doing after biomagnetism, which is kind of how we get this idea that hydrogen is what's, driving this process.
Interesting.
And so what happens is a lot of times when you have a body in a disease state, you're going to see the red blood cells are going to stack, and like the rouleau effect is what that's called, where they're not flowing properly. And since red blood cells are responsible for delivering nutrients and oxygen and so forth to the body, once you introduce and rebalance with the magnetic fields, it causes those red blood cells to unclump. So they flow better. And then the body's able to absorb the normal amount of oxygen, or in a disease state, more oxygen than normal, which causes an optimization of the entire system. And then of course the lymphatic system kicks in, starts to move some of this dead cellular debris out that goes through the kidneys and then through the bladder. So it makes sense that you have to pee after a session. So it's very fascinating, from a biological perspective. I find it, for me, it's the end all. I love it. I could talk about it all day.
What does it mean that Jim has a magnetic forehead? Paper clips, bottle caps, stick.
He said, "My third eye is magnetic. A paper clip or bottle cap sticks to my forehead magnetically."
Now this guy, is
okay.
like wicked psychic. You can do the whole ESP test where like, which card am I holding? And he's on it. He has psychic brain horns. They're super powerful.
So James, this is gonna be more of an assumption answer, but a lot of times when I have been doing sessions for clients, the pineal gland seems to sometimes want to carry its own charge. So there will be cases where maybe I have a pair for, pineal to thymus or to the spleen or whatever, where I will, the body will want, say the black side of the magnet here. And for us in biomagnetism, the pineal point's actually here and the magnetic energy flows down.
Interesting.
Where you would assume it would be here and directed that way, but pituitary is actually here for us, so which is interesting. Just the body has different ways of wanting to direct the energy. But anyway, to answer that question, I think that there's something to do with the pineal gland and its ability to either carry a magnetic field or charge in a way that maybe we don't understand. So I don't know if that's really helpful, but I have seen that with clients before. And again, for us, verifying the leg length is really what's telling us whether or not the polarity or the circuit has been completed, so to speak. So like if I were to place a black magnet on the pineal gland and then say, the thyroid, red on the thyroid, and if the leg is still out of balance, there's still that discrepancy. And then I go, oh, well, maybe the pineal gland actually wants red. Maybe the charge is different. And then so I flip flop them and then the leg goes even. That tells me that for that individual, the magnetic field, for whatever reason, is different. So
very interesting.
It is. If I had time, we could post urine work and blood work that I've kind of collected over time, and those are always very interesting because you get to kind of see before and afters, which are fun,
So, are you doing a concerted effort specifically on the pineal gland with those magnets to clear up the pineal specifically in those two?
Not specifically, so traditionally for us, the way that, for those of you that are curious, and I'll probably have to jump off here in just about 10 minutes, but essentially what we're doing is like, let's say that you came to me with, IBS or acid reflux, or you've got fibromyalgia, or you can name any disease, right? And essentially what we're doing is through the use of muscle testing, I start to ask the body questions about what pathogens may be contributing to this disease state, or what pathogens have shown up, right? Whether the body created them or not is really a moot point for us. It's just I'm trying to get this information so once I have it, I can know how to rebalance the body. And so It isn't necessarily specific to the pineal gland unless you've been having trouble sleeping. And then we may want to look at like the melatonin production and why it's not functioning correctly in the endocrine system. And so we would basically start asking questions through a preset built list of different pathogens that are in relation to different organ systems of the body. And through that, we're looking to see if the leg shifts, if it tells you a yes in a specific area, right? So like if I'm asking, like, is there anything, at the pole or the frontal sinus, is there an imbalance there? And if I see nothing, then I'm going to continue moving on. Is there anything in the eyebrow, anything in the cerebellum, the hypothalamus, the amygdala, anything in the cervical vertebrae, so on and so forth? And, as you're moving through this list, is there anything, in the clavicles or the thyroid? You're trying to hone in. And for us, that piece of the puzzle is sort of using the observer effect where, I don't know how many people are familiar with the double slit experiment, and maybe it wasn't done fully correctly, but it can give us a little idea that observation has everything to do with what shows up. So if I gloss over an area of the body and I'm not asking a question, I may miss something that's there. So we kind of try to work from head down to the toe, and then arms, legs, and then the posterior thorax to try and understand what imbalances are happening here. And those imbalances are in relation to actual diseases. So our goal is not just to say like, oh yes, well, I hope that you ambiguously feel better, but I want to say like, okay, well, you came to me with this verified, wart on your finger. And I have pairs that relate to what we would refer to as an associative disease that will cause this wart. So now I'm going to place these pairs and allow your body to start its repair mechanism. And then maybe we do 2, maybe 3 sessions. And then now it's clear. Now you don't have the issue. Same thing with like, staph infection or herpes or things like that. Again, I don't care whether the virus is real. I've had problems with the virus model myself. I'm not really entirely sure that what we describe as a virus is a true thing, but we can see that things like, genital herpes are a manifestation of something happening. So really this goes back to the idea with the whole cactus and please put away your spines. It's like, well, it doesn't really at the end of the day matter if the virus is a real thing or not. My intention is to ask like about this manifestation that I called herpes, and the body knows. So it goes, oh, yep, there's an imbalance here. Will you please place magnets so that I can recorrect it? So, and now I'm ranting.
That's cool, man. No, I love that you open a dialogue, and kinesiology is so cool.
It is. It's
so
magic.
Cool.
It really is magic every time. And I think for us, it's what an exciting thing whenever we get people who have never done muscle testing before. And once they actually get to see a yes and they light up, for me, that is just the end all be all. It's just so fun.
Nice.
Dude, I am so stoked that you guys were already talking about this muscle testing thing, because Michelle and I were just talking about it yesterday. And how using
another synchronicity.
I mean, this is where we live. I mean, this
right.
is a synchronistic universe. Just get used to it because it's happening.
Yep. Absolutely.
One of those things that we were talking about is training your intuition and using yourself. I've gone out to the desert and tried to train myself in this dowsing without anything, like just using my hands and just kind of using either a shaking or whatever motion that the energy wants to take me. So I've kind of tried to scale back all of these things like magnets and stuff, and just using me. No tuning forks, no equipment, just going out in nature and doing like grounding meditations and stuff like that. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up too is like doing Tai Chi or Qigong. Like when you do that and you manipulate your energy, you get the idea. Once you start to know and feel, this goes on to with the training of your intuition, is feeling it in your body with the muscle testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you go out and just feel in your body. So I've been finding these things all over the desert, right? And they're just iron balls.
Yeah.
And I started finding them in this area, and I started using my body to kind of douse for them. And it was like a great trainer for like feeling like this, your own subtle energies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've already like felt that doing Qigong and Tai Chi. You can feel your own energy torsion as you're manipulating it and feeling it and moving that energy up and down your body, right?
Right.
And so the more this is practice.
I think Qigong's the reason why, as I alluded to earlier, I could do a tuning process with just my hand and my voice.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because you're already feeling it. And
like I decide which frequency to work with somebody on, or which chakra to address next, or which body part to address next. I point at the table where, the crystals are symbolizing those parts of their body, or where the forks are laying there. And I just slowly point across the table, and then it'll click when I hit the right spot. And then I could even I used to double, triple, quadruple check and be like, okay, it really is that one. But now I just go with it.
Yeah. Eventually you just trust
that energetic sensitivity, because doing Qigong, I get those type of like clicks and pops and electrical cavitation, suction, charge, distribution type feelings in my head and throughout my body. And I don't even know where I'd be if I hadn't discovered those movements. I mean, it was totally life-changing to get that communication system with my body wired up.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, I think we touched on this a little bit before, Chance, but when I first learned biomagnetism, like the remote healing aspect was, a fun idea, but had yet to really prove that out for myself. And so there was a little bit of that skepticism for me involved, that like, okay, I mean, I really love the esoteric theory, right, that this can happen. But I just hadn't had personal experience with it. And so what did the universe do? As it always does in its irony, it just gave me a bunch of remote clients, was like, well, if you're going to be skeptical, then here's your new lesson, right? This is what you're going to learn. And that forced me to be able to get good at self-muscle testing. And then over time seeing like, oh my God, this is actually happening. Like this realization. I mean, I had a client, I've been working with this breast cancer client for a little bit. And I'm starting to do kind of the same thing though, Gordy, where it's like during a session, and there are different ways that I'll muscle test, but one of them I'll do these, you rock the fingers back and forth. And then when you ask for a yes, they lock up. And it takes a lot of practice, because you'll get a lot of false positives and you'll go, I think I'm doing it myself, and that kind of thing. But once you are able to kind of verify that. So anyway, I'm sitting there muscle testing it. This thought just comes into my mind. And I had already been scanning other parts of the body, but for some reason, the word tooth, just over and over. And I said, okay, go away, thought. Like I felt like I was getting distracted, and then it just wouldn't go away. So I said, okay, well, before I end the session, I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask about the teeth. And so then I pull up a tooth chart and I go, is there anything happening in the teeth? And sometimes I'll switch to this muscle testing method, which is kind of the thumbs here. And it's hard to show this on the camera, and this angle is very bad, but you essentially are moving your thumbs back and forth, and then you'll wait and you'll say, show me a yes. And one of the fingers will, right. Anyway, so I asked about, is it anything tooth 1 to 10? No. Is it tooth 10 to 16? Whatever. Turns out I got a yes on tooth number 31. So I write that down. And then I asked, well, where does the red magnet need to go? Right. So like for me, I'm asking, okay, there's this tooth. And once I get a hit on that, that's usually I go, is that where you want the black magnet? Yes. Okay.
Wow.
And And then I said, well, where do you want the red magnet? So then I start to ask, well, anyway, so I figure it out. And then I send this over to the client and I say, I found an infection in your tooth. Can you verify that for me? You know, and you're really taking a big leap of faith, because this is extremely specific. You know, it's not like, oh yes, you could be hot or cold, and there's a 50-50 chance you will be right. This is like, okay, it's the third molar on your bottom left side, you know. So anyway, I send her the picture circled which tooth it should be. And I don't know if this will show up. So let me see if I can find it.
If you show a picture of something that's on your phone, that's the Gordy method of screen sharing.
Okay, awesome.
Want to see an owl picture?
He's got a lot of owl
So
pictures.
we'll see. The lighting is so bad it may not show up. All right, so
Wait.
there it
worked.
is. And here's her response. I do.
See?
Oh my God.
Wow.
That's so
Wow.
cool.
Wow.
Now, what's interesting about that is that I, at the time, was in Little Rock, Arkansas. She's all the way in New Jersey. We're not on a Zoom call. We're not on FaceTime. Usually the way that I do my sessions is just me in private, and then I muscle test. I write everything down. I place all the pairs. I send the energy. We clear everything out. So that right there is just yet another proof for me that this method, whatever we're tapping into, is real. And I've had this happen so many times that, like you were saying, Chance, you just begin to just know, like, I mean, yeah, instead of like verifying it for yourself, like, oh, is the finger that I'm pointing to, is this really happening? Eventually you just go, oh yeah, well, I've seen it too many times now. So you just know. And I think that really for us as humans has something that they've tried to occult from us and take away from us and make sure that we do not understand or learn.
I think that's what all of the deference to the cult of experts and making authority the truth.
Exactly. Because
That's
really
all about cutting you off from the fact that you actually have a connection to the essence of knowing itself.
Exactly. And I mean, that's proof in the pudding, whether it be through the tuning forks or the magnets or Gordy going out in the desert and trying to glean the information. We're way more powerful than we've ever been told. And yeah, while I may not be able to, you know, lift the X-wing out of the swamp, right?
Yeah.
How amazing is it that, you know, something that seems absolutely incredulous, that it shouldn't be possible, that I can guess some person's tooth infection for, you know, that I'm not even in contact with at that moment, that you're tapping into. It's really just information. All of it's just information floating around. You just got to pluck it, you know.
But you're not guessing. It's being given to you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're plucking it out with the intention, because everything is really driven by this intention.
Exactly.
So
You know?
that's actually when I talk about intellectual scaffoldings to climb on, like having the knowledge of the biofield anatomy, for example, or a modality like muscle testing and biomagnetism and its principles, you're really, in my opinion, it's a language. Because maybe you can develop the sensitivity to get into like a yes or no basis type of answering system with your body. But then to take that to the next level and have as a framework or intellectual scaffolding that is a language where more complex answers can arise. That's actually what it is with a lot of these authentically effective modalities. The same thing's happening in each modality, but it's like one person speaking Latin, one person speaking Greek, but you know, the same type of thing can be effectively communicated and achieved in whatever modality.
You know, and this all comes back to, like you were saying, Austin, intentionality. And I think because what makes you good at this, Chance, too, and I know Slick is visualizers, good visualizers. Like, and the other thing we all have in common,
last week I was doing a tuning and I saw smoke come out of my fork and I blinked and then the smoke was gone. And then it flashed in my mind, this person started smoking when they were 12 or 13, which is about where my fork was in the Biofield. And it's like, did you start smoking at like 12 or 13? And they're like, yes. And I was like, I saw smoke come out of my fork, and I blinked and it was gone. But yeah, it's what it is.
It's so wild.
You know,
So I just did a quick Google because it's been bugging me like the entire 2 hours. I couldn't think of the guy with the cactus. His name was Luther Burbank. So if anybody wants to go look up Luther Burbank, absolutely fascinating. There's another French guy that it made me
Hold
think
on,
of.
Austin,
Like,
can I
it's
get
like,
what
oh, I'm
Gordy
sorry.
was about to say?
I'm sorry.
I kinda cut off Gordy, and then you
no,
jumped in.
dude,
No,
this
I'm
is all
sorry.
good. I love all this stuff because I
Okay.
mean, it's all about it. It's all coming back to the same thing. And dude, I mean, these 4 specific nerds, you comparing yourself to the Silver Surfer. So this is one and the visualization. Okay, this is how this is all going to come back together. Is when I try and visualize the healing in my hands, because this is how I kind of feel it in other people. Is I visualize it as Kirby Crackle. You know what Kirby Crackle is in the old Silver Age comics, right?
Yeah.
Jack Kirby, he would do hands. His hands were all like overly dramatic, you know, and grabbing like this and stuff, right? But in Doctor Strange's hands and a lot of the Kirby guys and like the early Cyclops, he would do these dots around explosions and power. Like they were to the Kirby art theme, it symbolized, there you go, that's it. The Kirby Crackle. In Doom, that's right. It was Dr. Doom used a lot of it. But I started using that visualization as a green light with the Kirby Crackle in it in my hands. And that helped me focus that energy as I'm like doing, you know, Qigong or doing it very slow, like Tai Chi, you know, and very slow and meticulous motions. And feeling that energy flow up through that torsion. And then and this definitely goes back to what Eileen was talking about with the layers, the bands. She was calling it bands. I remember seeing that in the different crackle.
That's fascinating.
You know, like different colors in the different crackles. And the other thing that I saw in that was it was going all the ways at the same time. Like each one has its own path, right? And at first I saw it as a kind of an atomic kind of looking thing. But then when you kind of zoom out, you can see it in bands. So, I mean, if you dig like visualizing your own energy, slow down, slow your breathing, and learn a little, you know, smooth Tai Chi or yoga. It's all energy work. Like it's all energy movement is energy movement. It's the same thing, but feel your own field.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cool, man.
It is
Love
cool.
This nerdy shit, man. It's awesome.
Well,
You can heal yourself with it.
Yes, you can. I think for me, that's, I don't know why it is something that I'm so drawn to, but I love the aspects of it. And I also love being able to see like something that can be in such a poor state, go from that to fully functioning, you know, and really then you get to see everything that goes along with that full functioning. You know, this person, you know, you may have seen them come in a very poor state of, you know, whatever, maybe they've struggled with acid reflux or knee issue or whatever. And then, you know, over time, they don't even remember why they came in to see you, you know, and they're going like, oh, my wrist hurts today. And you're going, well, you remember when you came to me originally, like you were in very bad shape, you know, look at this list that you complained about this, this, and this. And they go, oh, I forgot about that. You know, like, yeah, look how far you've come. Isn't that amazing? You know, that
They forgot about it. It's like
Right.
almost evidential of the fact that all that stuff is mental configuration showing
Right,
up as
that
physical deformation.
Right, that it didn't even exist really until you manifest it. Yeah.
I like
That's
to call
actually
it.
something I told a client was like, we are now starting at deficit 0. Your anger backlog is now at 0. So just let yourself express little things in the moment. Don't build up that debt,
Yep.
and you'll be set.
Absolutely.
I call it therapeutic denial.
Yeah.
It's
That's very
not the
true.
same as spiritual bypassing, I hope.
Right. Well, guys, I've got to jump off here so I can get a couple of winks before I go back to talking about magnets tomorrow.
You bet,
Right on, man. It was good to talk to you. Thanks for doing
Yes, you too, Gordy. Hey, thank you all. Gabriel, it's good to meet you too. Chance, I hope to see you again very soon, my friend.
Yeah, we need to get together. Little Rock ain't that far from me.
It's not. I can make a weekend trip before I sell the house. So, and
Nice.
it'll need to be soon because I've got all the wheels in motion there now. So, yeah, all the more reason.
Be in touch, man. Just tell me what we're doing. I need someone to just tell me what to do.
Okay. I'll text you and be like, hey, dude, on this day, we need to do this. Okay.
All right.
All right. I'll see you
Thanks
guys
for
later.
hanging with us.
Yeah. Hey, thank
a
you
little
guys.
late,
It's just been, it's all good. No worries.
Yeah,
and this
keep up
was
the good
truly
work.
my birthday wishes. I wanted to see Biomagnetism friend talk to Biofield tuning friend, and I really enjoyed it. It's a great birthday present. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I hope Eileen got something out of it too. It was a huge honor for me. I didn't even get to tell her, but yeah, I mean, I discovered her stuff before magnets. And so I was telling somebody earlier today how bizarre it was that I had, several years ago, I had said like, man, I would love to talk to this lady. She's just such a powerhouse. And then when I learned magnets, I had this thought that like, man, I bet Eileen would be really interested in this, but never thought that anything would come of that. So I'd be interested.
That's why you got to start a
hear
podcast so you can talk to the people that you wish you could talk to.
That you wish. That's right. All right, guys. Well, enjoy the rest of your time. Chat, guys. Thank you so much for being here, for listening. I know I can rant on biomag and microbiology all day long. So anybody that'll give me a platform, it's always a pleasure. I really do appreciate it.
Good to have you, man.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks for doing it, buddy.
All really enjoyed you too. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll talk to you guys later.
Get some good sleep.
All right. I will. Bye.
See you, bud. And linked in the show notes is a way to contact Austin if you would like a biomagnetism session. Also, Eileen's website is linked in the show notes. My links for tuning is in there. Now, I've been sitting on this for a little while. You guys got about 45 seconds or a minute to go through a couple of the voicemails in the call-in line?
Yeah, buddy.
Sure.
Okay, let's see what we got. One of them's from you.
Hey, this is exciting. 82 Wednesdays worth of vibrance and a birthday celebration. Happy 322 to Chance and Interverse Podcast. Wow, incredible, good stuff. I'm just sitting back quietly and listening and taking it all in. Thank you for offering this to us and for being a dedicated Spider-Man fan.
Oh, thank you, Alan.
Dedicated
Good to hear
Spider-Man
from you.
fan. We know you got the tattoos.
I thought it was over. Man, you just never know with him. Okay, here's Gordy.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
That was very good.
Huh.
Here's Braden.
Happy birthday to you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
y'all know
Braden.
the drill, though. If you ever want to drop us a voicemail in the Vibrant call-in line, I'll just go ahead and relink that to the live chatters here. But, that can be done anytime throughout the week. And people listening to the replay, you can still join the call-in line Telegram group. Also, don't hesitate to join the Interverse Telegram chat. We could really have used some new members, as all week we were stuck at 666 members, and I'm cool with it. But anyway, so yeah, what's up? What's up, Gabe? But you've been really awesomely respectful of letting the guests do a lot of weaving, and just want to say thanks for that. And the fact that you may not realize it, but you being here, you have a very powerful energy of witness, and you just witnessing improves the whole vibe. So thank you for all that, all those 82 vibrants that you've been here for, man. I really appreciate it.
That's cool you brought that up, Chance, because I read this week that the act of observation is an act of creation. And it kind of resonated with me since we've been doing these meditations and stuff. And it just sends me back to this whole discussion of muscle testing and building your own intuition of when the right timing for something is, and when is, because our chances to speak show up as we need to speak, not as we think we need to speak them. So the act of observing becomes a more of an art form, and it's observing our own bodies in that same healing process too, and figuring out our own intuition. So both of you guys, I appreciate you so much. And Chance, thank you for doing this. Happy birthday, brother.
Yeah, man. Big time. Happy flipping birthday. Yeah. What gets me every week without fail, I don't plan. I don't know what show is coming on.
Gabe doesn't know the show till the day of.
Yep. I don't have a clue. And it always syncs up. The synchronicity is just like, without fail, 82 times.
I will say though, buddy, as co-host, you have a right, and I dare say even a duty to throw some guest recommendations, or even, help us get people lined up. I would take that very seriously. I appreciate you being here. I really like you being in the role of the wingman.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for suggesting. Yeah. One thing I think about a lot is I don't have very good internet manners. There's so many things that other people do without thinking twice about it. And for me, it's like, it never even dawns on me, but that's one of those kind of things. Thanks for throwing that my way. I'll totally play my options on that. That's a good call.
So where are we at, gentlemen? Where are we at in, the expansion of consciousness in this present moment?
Feeling it. Here for it, man. It's happening.
I think we should get the old demystifiers dusted off.
Oh, I gotta tell you, I gave you guys a date of next Friday to do one.
Yeah.
Or heck, that's like 2 days from now.
Oh, really?
Before,
did we?
Yeah, hey, Gordy.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't block out the day on my calendar, and other stuff got booked for client sessions. So we're gonna have to hold back. But I really do. I've actually been revisiting a lot of Marvel material, and maybe we can kind of pre-weave a little bit about that right now, because I'm sure people would find that interesting. Like, I've rewatched the Avengers movies, and I also rewatched the Loki series. Both of those have so much to talk about in them, worth talking about. Particularly, I'll just unload, like, in the Avengers films, it was quite evident to us as Cooties was kicking off that the 5-year blip of Thanos in the Avengers movie killing half of all life in the universe was clearly an allegory for the desired result of COVID, or Cooties. Sorry, I like my code word better. And that, that was a very clear allegory, right? But go back to previous Avengers movies, and you see that other traumatic social engineering events are clearly echoed. Avengers 1 with the aliens attacking New York, most definitely a 9/11 moment. And even the way that, like, Tony Stark reacts to that later in the other films is clearly like the most traumatic moment of his life. But Avengers 2, well, actually, hold on, let me back up. the whole opening scene of Avengers 1 also blew my wig back, as Romy would say, that the Tesseract, this hypercube, fourth dimensional cube, all powerful device, is being tested on by the government at a facility called the Pegasus Project, or Project Pegasus. And there it is, dude. The entire notion of like the biblical city of God being in the shape of a cube and a lot of other cube symbolism is laid up in the
cosmic
Pegasus
cube
square. The Pegasus square is the square or the cube in the sky. And I was like, all right. At the moment that I saw they were calling the Tesseract experiments Pegasus, I realized all of the disbelief that I had fostered over the symbolism we looked at being maybe synchronistically coincidental and not intentional. I walk all that back. Whoever it is, somebody there knows what they're doing, and they're putting this stuff in there that we're noticing, and it's really there. But to finish out the point about Avengers 2, you have so much going on. There's a metaphorical war in Ukraine. There is
right, it's Ukraine, isn't it? Holy crap,
dude!
I forgot.
It's basically a metaphorical Ukraine. There's like a few other things I need to think about it, but like all the different plot points or events of that movie are earthquake in Turkey is in there.
Oh yeah,
it's not like literally an earthquake in Turkey, but when you look at the imagery, you're getting something similar. You know, it goes on. Avengers 2, so it's almost like they coded it in reverse. You know,
it seems that way. It's so fascinating, and some of these, like, they seem like a big ask at first, but when you come back at it and see it with the gestalt of it all, it becomes not too much of an ask. You know, like once I had done all the tarot cards with all the Avengers movies, I was like, somebody is dialed in on a huge level. And then, like you said, Chance, it's astrologically flawless. They are really speaking the star language, the Lumashi. It's preserved somewhere, in the military-industrial complex that is the MIC of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Real quick, speaking of Lumashi, Sunday night, John McHugh returns.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the Pegasus Square the whole time.
Oh, yeah. That's right on time because we're rolling out of Aries.
We might talk about Easter a little bit too, but yeah. Right on time. Right.
Perfect time.
I don't plan it that way. It's really awesome.
Nice. Man.
Excellent, man.
So we will get the band back together. Let's just have a little chat in our little private group after. I know we're talking shop in front of the kids, but let's get it. We will get it going. You will see the demystifiers probably in April, maybe sooner.
Right on.
It just gets a little daunting because every time we do it, the level of preparation and all that gets more and more. So having taken a break on it, I will streamline the process a bit, but we're going to have a lot of fun with that. People do love those. I love those. It's some of the most fun streams ever.
The details do get a little daunting sometimes because they are actually in there. Like you're saying, like,
yep.
I was finding little, I'll find going through images on my computer, all the little things that we've saved. And like, I found a little clip of the feast from the I think it was one of the Doctor Stranges from the truck, and which like led me to some, what was it? Blavatsky book or something like that. It was the code in the cars, the numbers on the cars or something. But what I'm saying is, I remember distinctly as we were doing these that, like, because you can see the myth that they're trying to put in there. They are all these things. I agree with Chance. It's all there. Like as we were doing it, and I'm thinking, there's no way they could possibly be putting this much detail into this, what they're meaning. And like in that instant, it was like, yeah, they were. They're like looking at me, looking at them, looking at us. They're watching us pick this shit apart because they were thinking it before us. We're going back now, seeing them do it.
Yep.
This is how we're time traveling, gentlemen.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, man. Yep. If a picture says 1,000 words, a motion picture can just go on for eternity.
Oh yeah, the other thing in Avengers 2 is the whole AI question is a big part of it, of course.
Oh,
Oh,
right,
right.
of course. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
might
Charter.
need to actually address those films. You know, they are the most daunting because they're the big bad 3-hour movies, but there's
Did
just
you
too
see a
much in there
new,
to ignore.
New
And
Iron
it
Man
pulls
4
together all the
coming out.
threads of the other movies, and it's a big project to try to tackle the MCU. I do want to continue on it though.
Did you
The
say
Thor movies are also worth it.
Did you say Iron Man 4, Gordy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just saw a teaser trailer for it today, like
Okay.
with the daughter or something. I don't know.
See, I knew
Yeah.
I wanted to say it. I
course.
wanted to call it. They're
Yeah.
all
Well, they
going
did it in the books too.
So all of these the new incarnations are all feminized. We've
Mhm.
got She-Hulk, we've
Thor
got
4 has a girl Thor.
Girl Thor, we've got a female. All these revamps are female reincarnations. That's really fascinating. It kind of makes me. I've always had this theory about if there was reincarnation, wouldn't it be kind of neat if we went from boy to girl to boy to girl to boy to girl?
It's so weird to bring that up. Me and Jenny were talking about that like today or yesterday.
Nice. That would just be it makes me think of a maypole. When you do a maypole, the boys go one way and the girls go the other, and they weave in and out as they circulate around the pole. And then when they're done, it makes a perfect braid on the pole.
Or like the Caduceus with the snakes going
Totally.
back and forth too.
Which Tiresias,
The Biofield.
the Biofield
Biofield.
of it. That's right. And Tiresias, I think I'm getting that name right. He's the character who he saw two snakes mating and he smashed them, and then he got turned into a woman. And then later on, he sees two snakes mating and he avoids them and he turns back into a man. Kind of interesting.
Just the fact that you brought up the whole incarnations, alternating genders.
Yeah.
The fact that you brought that up makes me almost put more credit to the idea being worth thinking about, because I was just on our minds and I was a little dismissive of it, but here it is popping up instantly.
No, it has to
it's
be.
not like we talk about that every day. It doesn't. You and I have probably never even entertained that idea together.
Right.
There's something. It gets the vibe. Your vibe affects your experiences, even in these subtle, in more intellectual ways.
I think if balance has to be the goal in the universe, balance will find its way. If we do have those cycles, it's going to be some sort of equality at the end, like where we've learned these lessons on this side of the being, like the feminine side, and these lessons on the masculine side. We all have to be both eventually. Like we're all going to be both.
Right. And I even just because it's on Chance's birthday, it makes me think like, what if there's a cool way to weave through your age so that all your odd years, you have more of a masculine expression of something. Maybe you smoke with your right hand, and then on your even years you smoke with your left hand. I don't know, just some way to observe the autumn and the even of the numbers of your life too. Just a thought.
Have you ever been regressed, Chance?
I've attempted to regress myself, and I came up with a few things, but no, I haven't. I'm not very easily hypnotizable. Not even to myself. I don't know what it is, but I used to be able to get into more of like a trance journey work type state when meditating, but I don't know what it is. It may have to do with the way that I posture my relationship to my body generally, that I'm always relying on being as in my body, grounded, feet on the ground, sensing in the physical body, in connecting with the physical world through the interface of the body, that it's actually kind of tough for me to get out of feeling like I'm in my physical body and into sort of inner world visionary states. You know, but what's weird is I can still have the intuitive experiences where I sort of like describe things as if I was really viscerally seeing them, but it's almost just more intellectual and ideas popping in, and I just say the idea. Does it make sense? I don't know what it is. I used to have a lot more visionary drifting out, and now I'm tend to be it's kind of hard for me to get myself out of my body. That being said, my dreams are popping off. I had the greatest dream last night where in a dream I had the ability to move things telekinetically, which I dream that I have that ability pretty often. And also I could fly. The flying was like not even a big deal because it's so common in my dreams. But to move things telekinetically, I had to like look at it, stare at it, and really concentrate and use my hand. And however I moved my hand would like gesture the directionality of the movement of the telekinesis. And in the dream, I developed the ability to do the telekinesis without looking directly at the object, just peripherally gazing at it and not moving my hand. So I was using this newfound power to like prank people and move things, without them knowing that I just did it. And I don't know, it was a really fun dream. I don't know what that means interpretation wise.
Nice. Yeah.
It's like that Karina Korogula stuff, the Russian psychic that used to move stuff with her hands, and then she stopped doing it, and that was her progress. She would move stuff under glass with her hands through the glass, so that there was no external thing. It was
I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
the experience I'm really thinking of, which is one of the last times I had a really profound sort of visionary journey type experience. I've probably told this story before, and keep me going if you want to hear the rest of it. But I attended a seance kind of accidentally once, and the seance facilitator had us all put our names on a piece of paper and on a table, and that table, all the names on the slips of paper were lined up in a circle with a glass cup. It was like a glass goblet with a candle in it in the middle of the table. And they picked a few people to go up to the table and project their intention through their hands for the cup to move and stop on top of a slip of paper. And that slip of paper would be the medium for the rest of the seance. And I was like I mentally sent the message out to the circle, but not verbally, that I volunteer. I don't know that anyone else should do it. I think I could protect myself and also achieve the task of being the medium. Don't know why. I just felt for sure like I should do it. There were about 25 or 26 people in the circle, and the 3 or 4 went up there, and it was wild. I've never seen anything like it, but they did not touch the table and they did not touch the glass, but the glass started to slide around the table. No one touching it. And no joke, it stopped and landed on the slip of paper that they picked up and flipped over, and my name was on it. and then the experience went on from there. But it was a very profound, that was the point where I was like, okay, the dead are just waiting for us to open up a portal to them and talk to them in a way, but they communicate through feelings, not through words. And there's a lot to that experience. I could flesh it out more, but I don't want to hug the mic.
I remember that story
too. Yeah,
that's a good one. I remember that. I think you told us that around the campfire at Snake Jones's. That was
That's a good campfire story. Yeah,
that was a great one. I just want to relate my dream was Gordy inspired last night. Now that we're talking about dreams, I'm so glad you brought it up. Very weird, like underground, like a sewer system, but people were living down there. So it's like people were casually walking around and like up to their thigh in water, and not thinking twice about it. And there was an owl perched in the corner, and the owl was it appeared to be mechanical. because its eyes were like spirals. And I went over to it and I was like, but it looked very real, but the eyes were not like a real owl. And so I went over to it and I was like, I'm going to just touch this thing, because it had real feathers and everything. And I went to pet the owl, and I noticed on its haunch was like a little opening, like a triangular opening. And so I like curiously put my finger in there, and the owl was stuffed with money. And they were like wadded up $1 bills and folded up ones, tons of them. And so I was like, this is weird. And I started pulling them out, and I'm like, oh, well, and they were old, like old $1 bills. And I pulled out a few of them, and I was like, and then I started getting self-conscious. Like part of me was like, okay, this isn't my money. It doesn't belong to me. But if I leave it here in this owl, somebody else is going to find it and come and take it. And so I like took a little more, and then I'm like, but now I just kind of feel weird just taking this money. And then the owl spread its wings and flew away and left me with a little handful of ones.
Wow.
Isn't that weird?
What a trip, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a wild dream.
So do you think that the ones are like little wisdoms or little truths or something, little blessings?
Yeah, and one thing I think about is that they are like pieces of history. I think that I wanted to like open them up and analyze them to see what year they were from, and kind of sense the energy of the times that they derived from.
Interesting. How cool. I'm going to think about that.
Yeah, man. That was a great show, by the way, over on Michelle's Healing Home. Everybody go get it.
Yeah, thanks, dude. That was a blast. I'm glad to do those.
That was
I
fun.
was in the audience in attendance there.
Yeah, you were. And you're because of this, these connections are happening, man. I appreciate it.
You're giving me too much credit.
We're connecting a lot of good weaves. The web is getting bigger and bigger all the time.
Well, it looks like maybe I ought to just tell that story about the seance.
Yeah,
maybe some people in the audience have heard it, but it's a good story.
Yeah, man.
I need my wife to come take this cat away and put it in jail, though. Yeah, I'll tell this story, and then maybe we can, after I get your reflections on it, that might be us wrapping up. But I was at a metaphysical, you could call it like a magic festival. People who are practitioners of occultism and magic with the K and all that. I was there with a booth and promoting my podcast. Early days, very early days. Here you go, darling. Please take this thing away and put it in jail. Yeah, and I was selling art. That was the main reason I was there. I ended up getting ready to go to bed and finding that there was a seance about to take place right by my tent. So I was about to go to sleep within 15 feet, like literally right next to me, within like 15 feet of, I don't know, interdimensional portals opening up. I say that kind of in jest. I don't really believe dimensions are as described by the New Age, but there was some kind of opening to some kind of energy about to happen, and I didn't really want to be unconscious around it. So I decided I would go sit in on the circle, and as it was getting underway, they had us write down on a piece of paper our name to have the medium selected, and then also they had us write down on a different slip of paper and put into another cup the name of somebody that we knew that was dead that we wanted to invite into the circle to potentially come through in the seance. So there's one guy facilitating, about 25 people in the circle, and I end up, as I described, getting selected as a medium after volunteering. The cup pushing method, where nobody touched it but the cup moved around. I'm not exactly sure I can't exactly remember the way the cup was set up, but it had to do with a candle and a glass like goblet with like a stem and a bowl. So after I was selected as medium, there was kind of like, there was a second person selected as medium. He actually wanted to get like 3 to 5, but after me and a second woman were selected, the cup stopped moving. It wouldn't pick anyone else. So it was just me and one other person. That was what the spirits had chosen, allegedly. And the warm-up event was to try to tap into the feeling of being guided by the spirits that were invited in, and to select a tarot card from the table and then hand it to who it belongs to or who it represents well. And so I did this. I picked a tarot card. I didn't know what the card was per se, but I was just like, all right, whatever it is, I don't know how you're supposed to guide me, but just guide me. And I'm holding the card and my arm just extends out. And as if somebody was like had a string attached to my arm and could swivel me around, I was swiveled. Like, I was not controlling it, and I was just swiveled until I was pointing at someone in the circle. And this girl was kind of like glammed up and, the most made up and I don't know the word, like Barbie dolled out type of one there, right? So the card, handed it to her. It was the Empress, which represents like, that energy of being put together, and Taurus and beauty and the Venusian thing. And, everyone agreed like, wow, she really embodies that vibe. And for me, what was bizarre was just the feeling like I was being pulled on a string directly to her. It was pretty weird. Like something else was moving me for me, but not like they were moving my muscles. It was almost like they were externally pushing me, guiding me. So it's not like I was taken over, right? It was the way that somebody could like grab you by the shoulders and turn you. It felt more like that. And then the second medium did the same thing. And then what we did next was a type of like guided visualization, guided meditation, where I was given instructions to pick like a place in nature that I was familiar with, and to put myself there in my mind's eye and, see everything that's going on. And then imagine that there was a river or a creek or a body of water with a bridge over it. And then that on the other side of this water was the other side where the dead are. So I mentally like walked across this bridge, and basically the whole time from there, they're just like, what do you see now? What do you see now? And I don't think I was hypnotized. I was fully aware of my body, myself, the room I was in. I was consciously choosing, what to say and what to do in my vision. Like, but, at the same time, I was clearly seeing in my mind's eye where I was at and deciding where to go and what to do next. So I found, after crossing the bridge to the spirit world, I saw in my mind a big mansion, older, like Victorian style mansion, not like crazy big, but pretty large, 2 stories. And I go in, I go into a few rooms, and I will, condense the story and just say that the first couple of rooms that I checked out, it was not really someone there to talk to me, more like some prankster type energy. And it didn't get much out of it. But then I went upstairs in this spiritual mansion, and I went into a bedroom, saw an old man with gold rimmed glasses, circular, and he's wearing like specific outfit. I think like a white polo type shirt and, jeans or whatever, kind of had a pot belly, balding, looked like anyone's grandpa. Right. And, at that point, they started asking me, like, is he communicating? Is he saying anything? What's he doing? And I described what he looked like. And then I said, he's jumping up and down and pointing at his shins. And then a woman in the circle all of a sudden just like sobbed audibly. And she's like, that's my grandpa. That's my grandpa. He wore glasses like that. He sounds just like how he looked. He was the one I invited into the circle. We were really close. He's gone now. And he used to always do a dance to make me laugh that he called the shindig. And that and I'm seeing this guy pointing at his shin and dancing around. Maybe it's not the dance he did for her, but he was communicating shin dig, shin and dance. So that really tripped her out. She's kind of crying, but also excited that he's there. And then the facilitator asked me if the spirit of this grandpa had any message for her, and he didn't communicate verbally. I asked him if he had anything for me to say to her. And at that point, like during the whole process of this visualization, I was very neutral emotionally, just very neutral, just observing and reporting. And then I asked him in my mind, do you have a message for her? And all of a sudden, my emotional state went from 0 to sobbing level emotion of gratitude and pride, like love and appreciation and being proud. So it was as if, like, for a moment, I was the grandpa for a second, feeling all that pride and love and appreciation for the granddaughter. And it was as if someone had turned a faucet on full blast from nothing. All of a sudden it's just rushing and pouring through. And then as quickly as it came on, the faucet's turned off and I was back at emotional 0. So usually when you have an emotional state like that, there's like a whole working up in your body that goes on, and the emotion builds up and builds up, and then you have the crescendo, and then you start to calm down and calm down and calm down, and the body goes through that process too. There's physical experience to that. But from this, it was like neutral, 0 emotion, full blast. I'm about to cry for 3 seconds, and then back to 0. No build up, no come down. It was, and so I took that to mean, exactly what I said. He's proud of you. He loves you very much. And I kind of explained it that way and gave the message that way. And, that's about the gist of what I wanted to share regarding that story. But that's something that I think anybody could potentially do. And it's just sort of about creating the conditions and asking the questions and inviting in the energy. And, I don't see why we don't do more of that. Especially if you have a certain person you wanted to connect with, why don't we spend more intentional time to, we don't have to do like table tipping and Ouija boards and Luigi boards and all that, but to just realize that in the exact same way as I was describing earlier in the show, how you might be doing some kind of aggro psychic vampirism type bullshit if you're having a mental argument in your head with somebody that's not even there, and how to like cool it. If you're doing that, that's you invading their psychic space. In the exact same way, if you know somebody really well, even if whether they're dead or alive, if you know them so well that you could have a seamless imaginary conversation in your mind with them, and you know what they would say, or you feel like what they would say just comes up, that's you communicating with them. Maybe they're not consciously going to remember it. Sometimes they might have even had like a little ping about you at that time or been thinking about you though. And so whether or not you don't need it to be like some verifiable, go check with them. Yeah, we had the talk. No, you're talking to like their essence or their energy or their spirit, because it's in you, because everything external to us is actually in us. The whole outer world is our inner world turned inside out so we can see it. And I think that living or dead, we can communicate with people that we want to communicate with. I actually used to do this practice of people that were no longer in my life. When I first learned meditation, I developed this idea of like, well, there's certain things that come up and I remember while I'm meditating, I feel bad about it. Like I knew I was bad or shitty to this person. So what I started doing when I didn't have a way to like go rectify the situation with them because I no longer had contact, I would do exactly that. I would mentally have a convo with them in my head where I resolved the energy of like my need to explain myself or apologize or, just in some way balance the scales between me and them. And that I think is a type of self-tuning practice that we can all do, especially with our younger self, like you and Michelle were talking about in Michelle's Healing Home, where older or young versions of ourselves from the past that we harbor a lot of resentment and judgment towards. Go have this mental conversation with your 18-year-old self until, you can let go of whatever you're holding on to, limiting that self and that energy, and accept them and love them and appreciate them for who they are. So that's all that.
Nice, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, bro. For sure.
Yep. You are a time traveler. You can do it.
So I got a synchronicity.
Nice.
I'll see your Shen and I'll match you. The card that I pulled off for the show, it belongs in my chart right next to the Aeon card with the glyph Shen. These two cards go with Pausanias here. It's kind of cool.
The shapes of them immediately look like an A and an alpha and an omega. Like a
Good call. Yeah.
like the shape of the what is it? What's the other one?
This one's an omega for sure, right?
Yep.
And this one, she's in a
It's an
kind
A.
of an A-shaped throne. Let's see if I can. There we go. But this is Pausanias's muse is Cleo. She's the goddess of history, so it's pretty apropos. She's got the scroll. I realized I used to think this was a bow, like a bow and arrow, but now I'm thinking that's also. I think both and. I think it's also a rolled out scroll. In most high priestesses, she's got the scroll rolled up and hidden, like tucked under her robe, but not this one. She's got it. She's levitating it, and it's out. It's it's revelation. It's unraveled. It's revealed. But yeah, that's kind of neat that you're talking about the Shens.
And then you know what happened after that seance? Then some weird Order of the Golden Dawn folks tried to convince me that I was a clone, or that there were a bunch of clones made from me, and that, you know, they basically strung me along, like they did the classic move of like build you up, love bomb you, appreciate you, then give you, like, once you know you're interested in them, and you then they give you like some kind of freaky info that pertains to you, that's mysterious and also kind of scary, but then they're cagey about it. Like, now you're coming to them like, come on, give me more, come on, give me more. And I realized instantly at the game, I was like, yeah, you're full of shit. This is like a recruitment tactic, like playing on my, I don't know, that Leo, like, self-importance, like, oh, there's clones of me, no, I must be the only one, I'm the special boy. And anyway, it took me like a whole 5 minutes after they told me that, and to realize, oh, they're trying to just set me up to be juiced or join their cult or whatever. So but watch out for weird old order of the Golden Dawn folks at magic festivals.
You know what, Chance, I'm glad you said that, because I wonder if there are any books out there on these kind of tactics. But what I have heard examples where they want to make an asset out of somebody, and what they'll do is they'll say, God, I can almost remember who this is. It's a famous, influential person from history, but they'll say, you have a rich family member in Europe who's about to die, and we can prove that you're related to them, and we have your genealogy, and if you do what we say, we can make sure you get the inheritance. And then they leverage the person to jump through a bunch of hoops because they think they're going to get this inheritance, and it's a fugazi. But what that makes me think,
more than that, it's probably giving up a lot of personal info and like, you know, identity theft, helpful, important info.
Yes, to turn them into an asset. Now, what this makes me think of is what a boondoggle it becomes to have 23andMe as an idea out there. That now they can just pop up anywhere and be like, hey, guess who we found out you're related to? And you could, and then pull their strings and then, turn them into an asset. It's crazy. It sets a very fertile ground for that kind of manipulation.
Carrie says 11:22. Good night, folks. I actually kind of had a wild hair that I wanted to end the stream at 3 hours 22 minutes, so that's kind of coming up. You guys cool?
All right.
With that?
Yeah, man.
Good.
All right.
Good brother.
Hey, Gordy, thanks for popping in and hanging with us at the end here.
You bet, buddy. Happy birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate you all. It's so fun to hang out with my best buds.
I'm so excited for the demystifiers to get back on the horse and
We're
ride
getting that
out.
band back together. Yes, we are.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. Big love to everybody who stuck it out.
Everybody in the chat.
This was a really cool special episode. Really appreciate it. Yeah. A lot of my favorite people tonight. All right. Well, good night. Happy Palindrome Day and happy spring equinox.